They tried to break him on camera. Instead, he broke their billion-dollar company. Tonight, you're about to witness the most savage workplace revenge story you've ever heard, where a single father working the night shift as a janitor gets publicly humiliated by a CEO in front of millions, only to turn the tables so hard it destroys everything she built. This isn't just about fixing an engine. This is about invisible people finally being seen. Stay with me until the end. This gets absolutely insane. And hey, drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Trust me, you're going to want to tell people about this one. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. The fluorescent lights of Vanguard Technologies' 92nd floor hummed with the kind of sterile brightness that made everything look clinical, detached, almost surgical. Ethan Cole had learned to move through spaces like this without being noticed. 6 months of pushing a cleaning cart through these halls had taught him the art of invisibility. How to empty trash cans while executives argued over million-dollar contracts. How to mop floors while engineers celebrated breakthroughs. How to exist in a room without anyone acknowledging he was breathing the same air. It was a skill he'd perfected out of necessity, not choice. Tonight was supposed to be like any other Wednesday. Ethan had clocked in at 10 p.m., just like always, his janitorial uniform freshly pressed despite the permanent grease stain on the left sleeve that wouldn't come out no matter how many times he washed it. That stain was a ghost from his old life, a reminder of who he used to be before everything fell apart, before the medical bills, before the foreclosure, before he became a shadow in his own story. He'd already cleaned the break rooms on floors 87 through 91. His daughter Lily's school picture was tucked in his shirt pocket, a ritual he maintained every shift, keeping her close even when she was miles away at his sister's apartment, probably doing homework at the kitchen table, her tongue poking out slightly when she concentrated on math problems. She was 9 years old and still believed her dad was going to figure things out, still believed the apartment was temporary, still believed they'd get their house back someday. Ethan wasn't sure he believed in much anymore, but he believed in her. That was enough to keep showing up. The service elevator deposited him on the executive floor at 11:47 p.m. The reception area was empty except for the massive Vanguard logo, a chrome V with circuit board patterns etched into the metal that dominated the wall behind the desk. Ethan had always thought it looked like a predator's teeth, sharp, unforgiving, ready to tear into whatever got too close. He was pulling his cart toward the hallway when he heard the voices, not the usual murmur of after-hours workers burning the midnight oil. This was different, loud, angry, the kind of tension that made the air itself feel pressurized. Ethan hesitated. He knew better than to get involved in executive drama. His job was to clean, not listen. But the voices were coming from the main conference room, the cathedral, as the engineers called it, and the door was wide open. Light spilled into the hallway like an invitation he hadn't asked for. 3 months behind schedule, and you're telling me we still can't identify the problem? A woman's voice, sharp enough to cut glass. Miranda Vale. Even people who'd never met her knew that voice. She'd built Vanguard Technologies from a garage startup to a $7 billion company in less than a decade, and she'd done it by being smarter, meaner, and more ruthless than anyone else in the room. Forbes had called her the Valkyrie of Silicon Valley. Her own employees called her worse when they thought she couldn't hear. Ethan should have kept walking, should have turned his cart around and found another floor to clean. But something in her tone made him pause. Not fear, which he'd expected, but something rawer. Desperation dressed up as fury. He moved closer to the door, staying in the shadows. The cathedral was packed. At least 40 people crowded around the massive conference table, but all eyes were fixed on the center of the room, where an engine roughly the size of a commercial refrigerator sat on a reinforced platform. Even from the doorway, Ethan could see the problem. The engine was beautiful. Sleek titanium housing, custom fabricated components, the kind of engineering that costs more than most people made in a lifetime. But it was also silent, dead, a $7 million paperweight. We've run every diagnostic. The speaker was a thin man in his 30s wearing a Vanguard polo shirt and the exhausted expression of someone who hadn't slept in days. His name tag read David Chen, Senior Engineer. The problem isn't in the code, it's not the fuel injection system, it's not the cooling apparatus. Every individual component tests perfectly, but when we run the full system, it fails. Miranda Vale stepped into view, and Ethan understood immediately why people were afraid of her. She wasn't particularly tall, maybe 5'6", and the heels she wore like weapons, but she commanded space the way a black hole commands light. Everything bent toward her. Her dark hair was pulled back so tightly it looked painful, and her gray suit probably cost more than Ethan's car. She moved around the engine like a predator circling wounded prey. 47 tests, 47 failures. We have investors flying in from Singapore in 6 hours to see a working prototype. And what do I tell them? That my elite engineering team, the people I pay six-figure salaries, can't figure out why an engine won't stay running for more than 8 minutes? Ms. Vale, with respect, this is unprecedented complexity. Another engineer, older, with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses. We're talking about integration issues across 17 different systems. The thermal dynamics alone. I don't want explanations. Miranda's voice dropped to a deadly quiet that was somehow worse than shouting. I want solutions. The military contract we're bidding on is worth $400 million. If we can't demonstrate this technology works, we lose everything. Not just the contract, our credibility, our stock price, everything I've built. The room fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the quiet whir of laptop fans. Someone coughed. Another person shifted uncomfortably. That's when Miranda's eyes landed on the doorway. On Ethan. He froze, his hand still on the handle of his cleaning cart. For a moment their gazes locked, and Ethan saw something flicker across her face. Not recognition, because how could she recognize someone she'd never truly seen, but awareness. The sudden realization that someone outside her circle of approved observers was witnessing this disaster. Who the hell are you? Her voice could have frozen nitrogen. Sorry, ma'am. Ethan's voice came out rough from disuse. He hadn't spoken to anyone except Lily since his shift started. I'm on the cleaning crew. I'll come back later. Wait. Miranda held up one hand and Ethan stopped like she'd physically grabbed him. She tilted her head, studying him with the kind of clinical interest usually reserved for lab specimens. What's your name? Ethan. Ethan Cole. How long have you worked here, Ethan Cole? 6 months, ma'am. 6 months. She smiled, but there was nothing warm in it. And in those 6 months, have you ever seen this room before? This equipment? Ethan's mouth went dry. He knew where this was going, could feel the trap closing around him even if he couldn't see its exact shape yet. I clean this floor 3 times a week, so yes, ma'am. Then you've seen this engine. It wasn't a question. Yes, ma'am. Miranda walked toward him slowly, her heels clicking on the polished floor like a countdown. The room had gone absolutely silent. 40-some engineers and executives watching this interaction with the horrified fascination of people witnessing a car crash. And do you know what this engine is supposed to do? Ethan glanced at the machine. Even silent, he could read its purpose in the design. The heavy-duty mounting brackets, the reinforced housing, the industrial-grade components built to withstand extreme stress. Looks like a power generation system. High output, probably for remote or mobile applications. Military spec, based on the ruggedization. Something shifted in Miranda's expression. Surprise, maybe, though she hid it quickly. Very observant for a janitor. The condescension in her voice made something tighten in Ethan's chest, but he kept his face neutral. Just good at noticing things, I guess. Good at noticing things. Miranda turned back to her engineers, gesturing at Ethan like he was a prop in a demonstration. Gentlemen, ladies, this is fascinating. Our janitor, our very observant janitor, has identified what $7 million worth of engineering talent has been working on for 3 months. She turned back to Ethan. Tell me, since you're so observant, can you see what's wrong with it? The room shifted. People leaned forward. Someone laughed nervously. Ethan realized with horrible clarity what was happening. He wasn't being asked a genuine question. He was being set up. Miranda Vale needed someone to blame, someone to humiliate, someone to absorb the rage and frustration of 3 months of failure. And he'd walked right into her crosshairs. I'm sure your team knows a lot more about it than I do, ma'am. Ethan tried to retreat, to fade back into invisibility where he was safe. Oh, I'm sure they do. Miranda's smile grew sharper. But I'm asking you, you push your little cart through here 3 times a week. You've probably overheard 100 conversations about this project. You've seen the prototypes, the tests, the failures. She walked to a supply cabinet and pulled out a mop, one of Ethan's mops, he realized with growing dread. She held it horizontal in both hands. So here's what I'm thinking. If this is so easy that even someone with no engineering degree, no technical training, no education beyond, what, high school? High school, Ethan confirmed quietly, can figure it out, then maybe my team has been overthinking things. She snapped the mop in half. The crack echoed through the room like a gunshot. So, I'm going to make you a deal, Ethan Cole. You want to be observant? You want to notice things? She threw the broken mop at his feet. You have 2 hours to fix this engine. If you succeed, I'll personally hand you a check for $10,000. If you fail, she smiled. Well, I'm sure there are plenty of other floors in Detroit that need cleaning. Ms. Vale, one of the engineers, stepped forward, a woman with short red hair and concerned eyes. This isn't fair? Miranda cut her off. You're right. It's not fair. Nothing about this situation is fair. We promised investors a working prototype. We promised the board results. We promised the Pentagon a revolution in portable power generation, and we have delivered nothing but expensive failures. She turned to address the entire room. But maybe I've been asking the wrong people. Maybe what we need isn't more credentials or more analysis. Maybe we need someone who notices things. She pulled out her phone and started filming. In fact, let's make this interesting. We're going live. Vanguard Technologies' official stream. Her thumbs moved across the screen. There, done. Everyone watching now gets to see whether the janitor can succeed, where our best and brightest have failed. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. He looked around the room at the sea of faces. Some sympathetic, most carefully neutral. A few openly hostile at the implication that their months of work could be solved by someone who pushed a mop. He saw the camera phones coming out, recording from multiple angles. He saw Miranda's predatory smile, the satisfaction of someone who just executed a perfect humiliation. This was a trap. This was always a trap. He was supposed to fail, to be embarrassed, to prove that credentials and education mattered, that the hierarchy was correct, that people like him belonged in the shadows where they couldn't threaten the natural order. He should walk away, should refuse, should protect the fragile stability he'd built for himself and Lily. But then he looked at the engine again, really looked at it, and something old and familiar stirred in his chest. A ghost of who he used to be. Before the medical bills, before Sarah died, before he learned that the universe didn't care about fair or deserve or who worked hardest, before he became invisible. 2 hours? His voice was steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. Starting now. Miranda glanced at her very expensive watch. It's 11:53 p.m. If that engine isn't running perfectly by 1:53 a.m., you're fired. And everyone watching, and trust me, everyone will be watching, will know that the janitor who thought he was smart couldn't even last one night. The engineer with the red hair, her name tag said Sarah Rodriguez, lead systems analyst, and something about the name made Ethan's chest ache, stepped closer. You don't have to do this, she said quietly. This is cruel and it's wrong. It's also $10,000. Ethan kept his eyes on the engine. And I need this job. Then don't risk it on her game. But Ethan was already moving toward the engine, his cleaning cart forgotten by the door. The crowd parted for him, and he felt their stares like physical pressure. Miranda positioned herself where she could film everything, her phone held steady, her expression one of barely contained glee. 2 hours, Mr. Cole. The clock is ticking. Ethan stopped in front of the engine, close enough to touch. Up close, he could see the craftsmanship, precision machining, custom fabrication, the kind of work that required both artistry and science. Beautiful. Expensive. Dead. He closed his eyes and took a breath, letting himself remember. A different workshop, different tools, a younger version of himself with grease under his fingernails and hope in his heart, standing next to his father in a garage that smelled like motor oil and possibility. Listen before you look, his father used to say. Machines talk if you know how to hear them. When Ethan opened his eyes, he wasn't a janitor anymore. He wasn't invisible. He was the person he'd spent 6 months trying to forget, the person who'd once run his own repair shop, who'd had customers drive 50 miles because they trusted his work more than anyone else's, who'd inherited decades of knowledge written in margin notes and grease-stained diagrams in his father's old journals. The person who knew how to listen. "I'm going to need some tools," Ethan said. Miranda's smile widened. "Oh, this is going to be good. Get him whatever he needs. Let's see what the janitor can do." As the engineers scrambled to clear space and gather equipment, as the camera phones multiplied and the live stream viewer count climbed, as Miranda Vale positioned herself for the perfect angle to capture his inevitable failure, Ethan Cole did something he hadn't done in 6 months. He rolled up his sleeves and got to work. The engine sat before him like a puzzle wrapped in titanium and hubris. $7 million of failure. The centerpiece of a company's future. The weapon meant to destroy him. Ethan ran his hand along the housing, feeling the cold metal, the careful welds, the precision that had gone into every component. Someone had loved building this. Multiple someones. He could see their care in every detail. That made its silence even stranger. "Curse." "Can someone tell me what exactly fails?" Ethan asked, not looking up from the engine. "What's the pattern?" There was a pause. Then David Chen stepped forward, tablet in hand. "It runs perfectly for 8 minutes, give or take 20 seconds. Temperature stays stable. Power output hits target numbers. Then suddenly the whole system crashes. No warning, no cascade failure, just instant shutdown. And when you restart it, same pattern. 8 minutes every single time." "What have you replaced?" "Everything." Sarah Rodriguez joined Chen, pulling up schematics on her own tablet. "We've swapped out the fuel system, rebuilt the ignition, replaced the cooling apparatus 3 times, even machined new housing from scratch. The pattern never changes." Ethan nodded slowly, his mind already working through possibilities. "And the diagnostic software? Shows no errors. That's what's driving us crazy. According to every test, every scan, every analysis, this thing should work perfectly. But it doesn't. But it doesn't." Ethan walked around the engine slowly, examining it from every angle. He could feel the room's attention on him, could hear Miranda's phone capturing every movement. The live stream counter on a nearby monitor showed 3,847 viewers, then 4,122, then 5,903. People tuning in to watch the janitor fail. "Can you start it for me?" Ethan asked. Chen exchanged glances with Rodriguez. "You want to see it fail?" "I want to hear it run." They initiated the startup sequence. The engine came to life with a deep, powerful thrum that Ethan felt in his chest. The sound was beautiful, clean, strong, without the rough edges or hesitation that would indicate fundamental mechanical problems. He placed his hand on the housing, feeling the vibration, the rhythm of combustion and power generation. His eyes closed. He listened. In his mind, he could see the layout. Fuel flowing through lines, air mixing in chambers, spark igniting, pistons moving, power converting, cooling fluid circulating. A symphony of mechanical processes, all working exactly as designed. Almost. There, so faint he almost missed it, a tiny irregular pulse in the vibration. Not a failure, not a flaw. Something else, something off by fractions. "How long has it been running?" Ethan asked, eyes still closed. 4 minutes, 30 seconds. The pulse was getting stronger, not by much, just barely perceptible, like a heartbeat slightly out of rhythm. 5 minutes. Ethan moved his hand to a different part of the housing. There. The pulse was stronger here, coming from somewhere in the integration between the power generation system and the cooling apparatus. 6 minutes. He opened his eyes and grabbed a set of diagnostic tools from the nearby bench, a thermal scanner. He ran it along the housing, watching the temperature readings. Everything looked perfect. Textbook. Exactly what it should be. Except 7 minutes. There was a microscopic temperature differential in the cooling system. 0.3 degrees. Nothing that would trigger any alarm. Nothing that should matter. But Ethan had seen this before. Not in an engine this sophisticated, but in the industrial generators that used to come into his shop. Different scale, same principle. When two systems that were supposed to work in perfect harmony were off by tiny fractions. 8 minutes! It's about to... The engine died. Instant shutdown, just like they'd described. No drama, no warning, just sudden silence. The room deflated. Someone muttered, "There it is," like they were confirming a terminal diagnosis. "Reset it," Ethan said. "What?" "Reset it and start it again. I need to confirm something." They did. The engine roared back to life. Ethan went straight to the same spot with the thermal scanner, watching the readings. The differential appeared again, right on schedule. 0.3 degrees, then 0.4, 0.5, building slowly, incrementally. He checked his watch. 7 minutes, 40 seconds. The differential hit 0.7 degrees. The engine died. "Holy shit," Ethan breathed. "What?" Miranda pushed closer, phone still recording. "What did you find? Or are you just stalling because you have no idea what you're doing?" Ethan ignored her. He was already pulling up the schematics on Sarah Rodriguez's tablet, scrolling through the technical specifications. There. The cooling system specifications, and there. The power generation system's thermal output curve. Both perfect, both exactly correct, both calibrated independently. "You didn't integrate the calibration," Ethan said. The engineers stared at him. "What are you talking about?" Chen asked. "Of course we integrated everything. That's literally the entire point of..." "No, you integrated the systems. You made them work together. But you didn't calibrate them together." Ethan pointed at the specifications. "Look, your cooling system is calibrated to handle the power system's average thermal output, which works perfectly under normal conditions. But this engine doesn't operate under normal conditions. It operates under extreme stress. Variable load, rapid power fluctuations." He pulled up another screen. "When the power system hits certain load patterns, which it does naturally about 8 minutes into operation, it produces tiny thermal spikes. Nothing dangerous, nothing that would register as a problem, but your cooling system is calibrated for steady-state operation. It's not adjusting fast enough to compensate for those microspikes." Sarah Rodriguez leaned in, studying the data. Her eyes widened. "The thermal differential triggers a safety shutdown." "Exactly. The systems are talking to each other, recognizing that something's off, and the fail-safe kicks in. You're not seeing a failure. You're seeing the safety systems working exactly as designed, protecting the engine from what they perceive as a calibration mismatch." The room erupted in noise. Engineers crowding around the tablet, arguing, pulling up their own data, checking calculations. Someone said, "That's impossible. We tested..." And someone else said, "Wait, he might be right." And a third voice said, "How did we miss this?" Miranda's expression had frozen somewhere between shock and fury. "Are you telling me that 3 months of work, $7 million in testing, and my entire engineering team missed a calibration issue?" "Not a calibration issue," Ethan corrected. "A calibration philosophy. Each system is perfectly calibrated. They're just calibrated independently instead of dynamically. It's not about fixing something broken. It's about teaching them to talk to each other better." "And you figured this out in 20 minutes by touching it?" Ethan met her eyes. "I figured it out by listening. Something your engineers couldn't do because they were too busy looking at screens." The silence that followed was profound. Someone laughed nervously. The live stream counter showed 47,293 viewers. Miranda's face had gone pale, except for 2 spots of color high on her cheekbones. "So fix it," she said quietly. "You've got an hour and a half left. Fix it." Ethan turned back to the engine. The diagnosis was the easy part. The solution was going to be harder. Recalibrating integrated systems wasn't something you did with a wrench and good intentions. It required precision, programming, technical knowledge that his janitor's uniform said he shouldn't have. But Ethan Cole had spent 15 years running a repair shop that specialized in exactly this kind of problem. Industrial equipment that worked perfectly on paper but failed in practice. Systems that needed someone who understood both the engineering and the reality, the theory and the grease-under-your-fingernails truth of how things actually worked. He pulled out his phone, an old model, scratched and battered, and scrolled to a folder of PDF files. His father's notes. 60 years of mechanical wisdom, scanned and saved before the bank took the shop. Calibration techniques for integrated systems. Workarounds for when the textbook solution didn't match reality. I need access to your control system, Ethan said, and someone who can code. Sarah Rodriguez stepped forward immediately. I can code. Good. Ethan showed her his phone, a specific diagram. We're going to create a dynamic calibration loop. Instead of fixed parameters, the cooling system needs to adjust in real time based on actual thermal output, not predicted output. That's going to require completely rewriting the thermal management protocol. Can you do it in an hour? She studied the diagram, her mind clearly racing through possibilities. Maybe. If we strip out the safety redundancies temporarily. No. Ethan's voice was sharp. We don't compromise safety. Ever. Those redundancies exist for a reason. Then we're looking at writing code for 6 different subsystems that all need to communicate. Then let's stop talking about it and start doing it. What followed was the strangest hour of Ethan's life since the night Sarah, his Sarah, not Rodriguez, had died in a hospital bed holding his hand. He found himself in a world he'd thought he'd left behind forever, speaking a language he'd tried to forget, being a person he'd decided was too painful to be anymore. Rodriguez pulled up the control system architecture while Ethan sketched out the calibration curves by hand on a whiteboard, translating his father's decades-old notes into solutions for cutting-edge technology. Chen brought in additional engineers who could implement the code changes, and Ethan found himself explaining concepts he'd learned in a garage workshop to people with PhDs from MIT and Stanford. The weird thing was, they listened. Wait, show me that calculation again, one engineer said, and Ethan walked him through the math, not the academic version, but the practical version, the one that accounted for real-world factors that textbooks ignored. How did you know to account for ambient temperature variance? Another asked, and Ethan explained about summer repairs versus winter repairs, about how a perfectly calibrated system in a climate-controlled lab behaved differently in a Michigan winter. Rodriguez worked like a woman possessed, her fingers flying across the keyboard, translating Ethan's hand-drawn diagrams into executable code. Every few minutes, she'd stop and ask a question. What if the load fluctuation exceeds this threshold? And Ethan would have an answer, pulling from 15 years of experience, fixing things that smarter people said couldn't be fixed. Miranda watched it all with an expression Ethan couldn't read. The phone was still recording, but her predatory smile had vanished, replaced by something more complicated. The live stream counter had hit 6 figures. People were watching the janitor and the engineers collaborate in real time, watching the impossible happen. 30 minutes, someone called out. Ethan looked at the code on the screen. Will it work? Theoretically? Rodriguez shook her head. I have no idea. We're doing things with the thermal management system that it was never designed to do. We're asking it to make decisions on the fly that normally require, will it work? Ethan repeated. She met his eyes. You really think this is going to fix it? I think these systems are smarter than we give them credit for. They don't want to fail. They just need to speak the same language. Rodriguez made a decision. Then let's find out. She hit several keys in rapid succession. Codes compiled, ready to upload. Do it. The upload took 3 minutes, the longest 3 minutes of Ethan's life. He watched the progress bar crawl across the screen while the room held its collective breath. Miranda's phone was still recording. The live stream counter showed 127,849 viewers. Upload complete. Start it up, Ethan said. Chen initiated the startup sequence. The engine came to life again, that same powerful thrum. But this time, Ethan watched the diagnostic screens as the new calibration protocol took effect. The cooling system was actively adjusting now, responding to real-time data instead of predicted curves. Tiny fluctuations that would have built into that fatal differential were being compensated for on the fly. 1 minute. The temperature readings stayed perfectly stable. 2 minutes. Still stable. 5 minutes. The room was absolutely silent except for the engine and the quiet hum of computers. Someone was breathing heavily. Ethan realized it was him. 7 minutes. This was where it had always failed before, where the thermal differential had built to the point that the safety systems triggered shutdown. Ethan watched the screens, watching the cooling system dance with the power fluctuations, adjusting, compensating, learning. 8 minutes. The engine kept running. 9 minutes. Still running. 10 minutes. Someone made a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. The engine was still running, perfectly, powerfully, the way it had always been meant to run. 12 minutes. Ethan's knees felt weak. He grabbed the edge of the table for support. This was working. This was actually working. 15 minutes. The room erupted, not in celebration yet, but in disbelief. Engineers crowding around the diagnostic screens, checking the data, confirming what they were seeing. The thermal management system was working perfectly, adjusting to every fluctuation, keeping everything in perfect harmony. 20 minutes. Someone started crying. Chen was laughing, shaking his head in amazement. Rodriguez grabbed Ethan's arm, her grip tight enough to hurt. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Oh my God, you did it." 30 minutes. People were hugging. Someone popped open a bottle of something expensive, champagne maybe, kept in the mini fridge for a success that had seemed impossible until tonight. The live stream counter showed 243,127 viewers. Comments were flying past too fast to read. Miranda stood frozen, her phone still raised, still recording. Her face had gone completely blank. Ethan watched her try to process what was happening. The janitor had fixed the unfixable, live on camera, in front of 250,000 people. The humiliation she'd planned for him had backfired so spectacularly that he could see her recalculating everything in real time. 1 hour. The party was in full swing now. Engineers who hadn't spoken to each other in weeks were celebrating together. Someone had ordered pizza. The engine kept running, steady and perfect, like it had never been broken at all. Ethan stood apart from it all, watching. His uniform felt strange now, like a costume he'd outgrown. His hands were shaking, not from fear or exhaustion, but from something else. Recognition. The feeling of being seen after months of invisibility. Sarah Rodriguez found him by the window, looking out at Detroit's nighttime skyline. "You know what you just did, right?" she asked quietly. "Fixed an engine? Saved this company. That military contract, we can demonstrate the prototype now. The investors flying in, they're going to see something that works. You just salvaged a $7 billion company in under 2 hours with a calibration fix and some 60-year-old notes." Ethan shook his head. "Your team did the work. I just pointed in a direction." "Bullshit." Rodriguez's voice was firm. "You diagnosed a problem none of us saw. You solved it with knowledge none of us had. You taught PhD engineers things they didn't know. She paused. "Where did you learn all this?" Before Ethan could answer, Miranda's voice cut through the celebration like a blade. "Turn it off." The room fell silent. Engineers froze mid-celebration. Someone muted the music that had started playing. "What?" Chen asked. "Turn the engine off. Now." They shut down the system. The sudden silence felt oppressive after an hour of steady operation. Miranda walked to the center of the room, her heels clicking like a judge approaching the bench. She looked at Ethan, and her expression was carefully neutral in a way that made his stomach tighten. "Congratulations, Mr. Cole." Her voice was perfectly modulated, professional, empty of emotion. "You've done what my team couldn't do in 3 months. You've saved a military contract worth hundreds of millions. You've salvaged our company's reputation." She paused. "You've embarrassed me in front of 250,000 people." The live stream was still running. Ethan could see himself on the monitor, a janitor in a worn uniform standing in a room full of engineers, looking tired and overwhelmed and nothing like a hero. "I promised you $10,000 if you succeeded," Miranda continued. "I'm a woman of my word." She pulled out her phone and made a few gestures. "The money will be in your account by morning. You've earned it." Something in her tone made Ethan's skin crawl. This wasn't over. This was the calm before something worse. "However," Miranda said, and there it was. "I think we need to have a conversation about how you came to possess this knowledge, about your background, about how a janitor knows things that senior engineers don't know." Her smile was sharp enough to draw blood. "About whether you've been entirely honest on your employment application." The threat hung in the air like poison gas. Ethan felt the room's atmosphere shift. Rodriguez looked alarmed. Chen looked confused. Other engineers were exchanging worried glances. Miranda had done her research fast. She knew something, or thought she did, and she was going to use it. "My office," she said. "Now. The rest of you, shut down the live stream. This conversation is private." As the camera phones lowered and the official stream ended, as the celebration died and the engineers dispersed with uncomfortable backward glances, Ethan followed Miranda Vale toward her corner office. He could feel the walls closing in. He'd been visible for 2 hours, and already the world was punishing him for it. Some traps, he thought, you walk into with your eyes wide open. He just hadn't expected this one to hurt quite so much. Miranda's office occupied the northwest corner of the 92nd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of Detroit that made the city look almost beautiful at night. The lights masked the decay, the empty buildings, the neighborhoods that had never recovered from the recession. From up here, it all looked like possibility instead of ruin. Ethan had cleaned this office a dozen times. He knew the layout intimately. The massive mahogany desk that probably cost more than a year of his salary, the leather chairs arranged around a glass coffee table, the wall of awards and framed magazine covers featuring Miranda's face. The Valkyrie of Silicon Valley. Tech's most ruthless CEO. The woman who rebuilt Detroit. She'd never spoken to him during those cleaning sessions. Never acknowledged his existence beyond occasionally moving her feet when he needed to vacuum under her desk. He'd been furniture, background noise. Invisible. Now she gestured to one of the leather chairs like they were equals meeting for a business discussion. The door clicked shut behind them with a finality that made Ethan's chest tighten. "Sit," Miranda said. It wasn't a request. Ethan sat. The leather was butter-soft and probably Italian. It felt wrong against his worn uniform. Miranda moved to her desk, fingers dancing across her keyboard, pulling up something on the massive monitor that dominated the workspace. Her face was illuminated by the screen's glow, sharp angles, and calculating eyes. "Ethan Cole," she read aloud. 42 years old, employed at Vanguard Technologies for 6 months as a member of the facility's maintenance team. High school diploma, no college, no technical certifications. Previous employment listed as... She paused, and Ethan's stomach dropped. Various positions. Retail, warehouse work, nothing that would suggest the expertise you displayed tonight. She turned the monitor so he could see it. His employment application, the one he'd filled out in the HR office 6 months ago, desperate and terrified and willing to take anything that would let him keep the lights on and Lily fed. He'd been careful. He'd left things out. Not lies, exactly, just omissions. "Interesting," Miranda continued, "because I had my assistant do some digging during your little performance out there. And do you know what she found?" She pulled up another window. "Ethan Cole, owner of Cole & Son Automotive Repair, East Detroit. Opened 2008, closed 2023, specialized in industrial equipment repair, custom fabrication, diagnostic work. Customer reviews called you the best mechanic in Michigan and the guy who fixes what everyone else can't." The words hit Ethan like physical blows. Cole & Son. His father's dream passed down to him, nurtured for 15 years until medical bills and debt and grief had crushed it to death. He tried so hard to leave that life behind, to become someone new, someone who couldn't be hurt by hope. "You lied on your application," Miranda said flatly. "I didn't lie." Ethan's voice was steady despite the panic rising in his throat. "I answered every question truthfully. You asked about my last 3 years of employment. The shop closed 2 years ago. Before that, I worked retail to supplement income when business was slow. Everything I wrote was accurate. Technically accurate, practically deceptive." Miranda leaned against her desk, arms crossed. "You deliberately hid your expertise. Why?" Ethan met her eyes. "Because I needed a job, and I knew if I listed mechanic experience, you'd either reject me for being overqualified or expect me to work for engineering wages. I couldn't afford to wait for the perfect position. I had rent due and a daughter to feed." "A daughter?" Miranda glanced at her screen again. "Lily, 9 years old, lives with you in a 1-bedroom apartment in Corktown. Her mother..." Something flickered across Miranda's face. Not quite sympathy, but maybe recognition of pain. "Sarah Cole, died 2 years ago, pancreatic cancer." Hearing Sarah's name in this woman's mouth made something violent surge in Ethan's chest. "Don't," he said quietly. "Don't talk about her." "The medical bills bankrupted you." Miranda kept reading like she hadn't heard him. "Foreclosure on your house, liquidation of business assets. You lost everything." "I didn't lose everything." Ethan's voice was hard. "I kept my daughter. That's not nothing." Miranda was silent for a long moment, studying him with those calculating eyes. Then she closed the laptop with a soft click. "Here's my problem, Mr. Cole. You just saved my company in front of 250,000 people. The live stream is already going viral. Twitter is calling you the janitor genius. Reddit has 5 threads analyzing what you did. By tomorrow morning, you'll be famous. I don't want to be famous. Too late. You are." She moved to the windows, looking out at the city. "Which means I have decisions to make. I could fire you for falsifying your application. Would be justified, legally speaking. Would send a message that honesty matters." Ethan's hands clenched on the chair arms. "You promised me $10,000. And you'll get it. I keep my promises. But that doesn't mean you keep your job." She turned back to face him. "Or I could promote you, make you an engineer, give you a salary that matches your obvious skills. Turn tonight's viral moment into a heartwarming story about recognizing hidden talent. Great PR. Stock price would probably jump." It sounded too good. Nothing in Ethan's life had been too good for a very long time. "What's the catch?" "The catch is that you embarrassed me." Miranda's voice went cold. "You made me look foolish in front of investors, employees, and the entire internet. You made my engineers look incompetent. You disrupted a hierarchy that I've spent 10 years building." She walked closer, and Ethan could smell her perfume, something expensive that probably had a French name. "I don't like being embarrassed. I don't like disruption, and I especially don't like being outmaneuvered by someone I thought was beneath my notice." There it was, the real Miranda Vale, stripped of the professional veneer, brilliant, ruthless, and absolutely furious that a janitor had exposed the limits of her control. "So, here's what's going to happen." Miranda's voice was surgical in its precision. "You're going to come in tomorrow at 8 a.m. You're going to sign a new contract with Vanguard. Better pay, better title, something impressive that makes tonight's story sound inspirational instead of humiliating. You're going to work on my engineering team, and you're going to be brilliant and grateful and appropriately humble about your good fortune. And if I refuse, then I fire you for application fraud. I make sure every company in Detroit knows you're a liability. I tie you up in legal proceedings that you can't afford to fight. And Lily," Miranda let the name hang in the air. "Well, single parents need stable employment, don't they? Especially when they're one missed rent payment from eviction." The threat was clear, explicit. Ethan felt something shift inside him, some last reserve of compliance cracking under the pressure of her casual cruelty. He'd spent 6 months making himself small, staying invisible, accepting humiliation because he'd thought it was necessary for survival. But he'd also just spent 2 hours being visible, being seen, being the person he used to be, before grief and debt had convinced him that hiding was safer than hoping. "No," Ethan said quietly. Miranda blinked. "Excuse me?" "No, I'm not doing it." Ethan stood up, his legs steady despite his racing heart. "You can fire me. Fire. You can threaten me. You can make my life difficult. But I'm not going to let you turn me into a prop for your redemption story. You're making a mistake. Maybe. But it's my mistake to make." Ethan moved toward the door. "I fixed your engine because you challenged me to. I proved I could do it. I earned that $10,000, and you admitted it yourself. You keep your promises. So pay me what you owe me, and then we're done." "You have no leverage here." Miranda's voice was sharp with disbelief. "You need this job. You need the money. I need my dignity more than I need your charity." Ethan put his hand on the door handle. "I've spent 6 months being invisible because I thought that's what survival looked like. But tonight reminded me that there are worse things than being seen, like being owned." He opened the door. "They'll forget about you in a week," Miranda called after him. "The internet moves on. The viral moment ends. You'll be back to pushing a mop, except now you won't even have that because you'll be unemployed." Ethan paused in the doorway. "Maybe. Or maybe I'll figure out what comes next on my own terms instead of yours. He looked back at her, this powerful woman in her expensive suit in her corner office overlooking a city she thought she'd conquered. You asked me why I hid my expertise. I'll tell you the truth, I was scared. Scared of being seen, scared of failing, scared of hoping for something better because hope had hurt me before. He took a breath. But you know what I realized tonight? Fear made me invisible, but it didn't make me safe. It just made me small. So thank you, Ms. Vale. You tried to humiliate me, and instead you reminded me who I am. That's worth more than any job you could offer. He walked out before she could respond, his heart hammering, his hand shaking with adrenaline and terror, and something that felt dangerously close to freedom. The main conference room was mostly empty now. A few engineers lingered, documenting the successful test, downloading data. Sarah Rodriguez looked up as Ethan emerged from Miranda's office, and something in his expression made her stand. "You okay?" she asked. "I just quit." "You what?" "I told Miranda Vale that I wasn't interested in being her pet genius." Ethan laughed, a slightly unhinged sound. "I think I might be having some kind of breakdown." Rodriguez stared at him like he'd announced he could fly. "Do you have another job lined up?" "Nope." "Savings?" "About $300. "A plan of any kind?" "Not even a little bit." Rodriguez shook her head, but she was smiling. "So you're either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Why not both?" Ethan glanced at the engine, still sitting silent on its platform. "Can I ask you something? Why did you help me tonight? You could have stayed quiet, let me fail. Would have been safer for you." "Because it was wrong." Gosh, Rodriguez said it simply, like it was obvious. "What she did to you was cruel. And watching you work," she paused. "You weren't trying to show off or prove anything. You were just solving a problem because that's who you are. That's rare, especially in this industry. Thank you for the code, for believing it would work. Thank you for knowing things that MIT didn't teach me." She pulled out her phone. "Listen, I know you just dramatically quit, but can I give you my number in case you change your mind about the whole employment thing, or in case you need a reference, or just someone to talk to who understands what happened tonight?" Ethan saved her contact information, feeling strange about it. 6 months of isolation had made normal human connection feel foreign. "I should go. Long train ride home." "Train? You don't have a car?" "Sold it 8 months ago. Needed the money." Rodriguez looked like she wanted to say something, maybe offer a ride, but Ethan was already moving toward the elevator. He needed to get out of this building before Miranda changed her mind about something, or before he realized what he'd just done and panicked. The service elevator took him down 92 floors. His cleaning cart was still by the door in the conference room. His supervisor would wonder where he'd gone. There would be paperwork. An exit interview, probably. He'd have to turn in his uniform and his ID badge and whatever remained of the careful, invisible life he'd constructed. The lobby was empty except for a night security guard who nodded at Ethan without recognition. Outside, Detroit's November air hit him like a cold slap. It was almost 3 a.m. The last train to Corktown left in 20 minutes. Ethan's phone buzzed, a text from a number he didn't recognize. "This is David Chen from Vanguard. Sarah Rodriguez gave me your number. I don't know what happened with Miranda, but what you did tonight was incredible. If you ever want to talk about consulting work or freelance opportunities, call me." Then another text, this one from Rodriguez herself. "By the way, the live stream had 380,000 viewers when we shut it down. Your name is trending on Twitter. Thought you should know." Ethan stared at the messages, then at the city around him. Somewhere in Corktown, Lily was asleep at his sister's place, dreaming whatever 9-year-olds dreamed about. Tomorrow he'd have to tell her that Daddy had quit his job, that things might be uncertain for a while, that they might have to move again, or accept more help from Aunt Jennifer, or make more sacrifices. But he'd also get to tell her that Daddy had fixed an engine that experts couldn't fix, that sometimes being brave was more important than being safe, that hiding wasn't the same as protecting yourself. His phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. "Mr. Cole, my name is Robert Chen. No relation to David, different spelling. I'm a senior partner at Meridian Equity. We're investors in Vanguard Technologies. I watched your live stream tonight. I'd like to discuss a business opportunity. Please call me at your earliest convenience. Then another. Ethan Cole? This is Jessica Park from TechCrunch. We'd love to interview you about what happened tonight at Vanguard. Would you be available tomorrow? And another. Mr. Cole, I'm a producer for Good Morning America. We're interested in featuring your story. Ethan turned his phone off. This was too much. Too fast. 6 months of invisibility, then 2 hours of exposure, and now the world wanted pieces of him he didn't know how to give. The train station was 3 blocks away. Ethan walked through empty streets, past closed businesses and the occasional homeless person huddled in doorways. He passed a 24-hour diner where a waitress was wiping down tables, preparing for the pre-dawn rush. The window reflected his image back at him, a man in a janitor's uniform who just walked away from salvation because it had come wrapped in chains. He made it to the station with 5 minutes to spare. The platform was nearly empty. A couple of other night shift workers, a teenager with headphones, an elderly woman clutching a shopping bag. People living on the margins of the city's 24-hour metabolism. Ethan found a bench and sat heavily, exhaustion crashing over him now that the adrenaline was fading. His hands were still shaking, not from fear anymore, but from the aftershocks of a decision he couldn't take back. "Excuse me." A voice pulled him from his thoughts. A young man, maybe 25, holding a phone. "Are you Ethan Cole? The guy from the video?" Ethan considered lying, considered saying no, wrong person, you're mistaken. But what was the point? His face was already out there. His name was trending. The invisible man had been seen, and you couldn't unsee that. "Yeah," he admitted. "That's me." The young man's face lit up. "Dude, that was amazing. What you did tonight, I'm studying engineering at Wayne State, and watching you solve that problem in real time, it was like..." He struggled for words. "It was like watching someone speak a language everyone else had forgotten. Can I ask you something?" Ethan braced himself for questions about Miranda or the job or what happened after the cameras stopped rolling. "Sure." "How did you know to trust yourself? Like, you're standing in a room full of people with degrees and credentials, and you believed you were right. How did you do that?" The question caught Ethan off guard. He thought about it, really thought about it. "I didn't actually believe I was right. I was terrified I'd fail, but I believed in the work more than I believed in the fear. Does that make sense?" "Yeah." The young man nodded slowly. "Yeah, that makes sense." He hesitated. "Thank you for doing what you did, for showing people like me that maybe credentials aren't everything, that knowledge can come from other places." The train arrived with a screech of brakes and a blast of stale air. Ethan stood, suddenly exhausted down to his bones. Just remember that credentials matter too. I'm not saying education is worthless, but it's not the only thing that matters. Experience counts. Instinct counts. Listening counts. He boarded the train, found a seat by a window, watched Detroit roll past in the darkness, abandoned factories, new developments, old neighborhoods holding on, new ones taking root. A city that had died and refused to stay dead, constantly reinventing itself through sheer stubborn will. Maybe he could do that too. The train rattled through the night, and Ethan let himself close his eyes. Tomorrow would bring consequences. Miranda would make good on her threats, or she wouldn't. The viral moment would fade, or it wouldn't. Job offers would materialize, or they wouldn't. He'd figure out how to pay rent, or he wouldn't. But tonight, for the first time in 2 years, Ethan Cole had been himself. Fully, completely, unapologetically himself. He'd used knowledge inherited from his father, skills honed over 15 years, instincts earned through 1,000 repairs and 100 failures. He'd been visible. It had been terrifying. It had probably been stupid. It might have been the biggest mistake of his life, but it had also felt like waking up. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Despite his resolution to ignore it, Ethan pulled it out. One more message from a number saved in his contacts. Jennifer, his sister. "Lily had a nightmare. She's okay now, but asking for you. I showed her the video someone sent me. She says you look like a superhero. Come get her when your shift ends. She wants to tell you about her science project." Ethan stared at the message, something tight loosening in his chest. Lily had seen the video. Lily had seen him be competent, confident, capable. Not the tired ghost who tucked her in at night and promised things would get better someday, but the person he used to be. The person he'd almost forgotten he could be. He typed back, "Tell her Daddy's coming. And yes, I want to hear about the science project. I'm done with my shift. Done with a lot of things, actually. We'll explain later." The train pulled into Corktown Station at 3:47 a.m. Ethan walked the 6 blocks to his sister's apartment building, a converted warehouse that had been gentrified just enough to be expensive but not enough to be nice. Jennifer met him at the door in her bathrobe, gray showing in her dark hair, worry lines deep around her eyes. "What the hell happened tonight?" she asked without preamble. "My phone has been blowing up with people sending me videos of my brother doing some kind of engineering miracle. Did you really fix something that MIT graduates couldn't fix?" "Stanford mostly, a few MIT. Ethan stepped inside, lowering his voice. "Is Lily asleep?" "She tried to wait up for you, finally crashed around midnight." Jennifer led him to the small living room, where Lily was curled up on the couch under a blanket covered in stars. Her dark hair, Sarah's hair, spread across the pillow. Her face was peaceful in sleep, completely trusting that the world would still be there when she woke up. Ethan knelt beside the couch, careful not to wake her, just looked at his daughter, this perfect thing that he and Sarah had made, this reason he got up every morning and pretended hope was still possible. "I quit my job," he told Jennifer quietly. His sister sat down hard on the nearby chair. "You what?" "Miranda Vale tried to blackmail me into accepting a promotion I didn't want. Threatened to ruin my life if I didn't cooperate, so I walked out." "Jesus, Ethan." Jennifer ran her hands through her hair. "What are you going to do?" "I have no idea." He said it with a laugh that was almost genuine. "For 6 months I've been so careful, so cautious, trying to be invisible, trying not to make waves, and tonight I threw all of that away because I couldn't stand to be owned." "That's very noble. Also very stupid. You have a daughter." "I know, believe me, I know." Ethan touched Lily's hair gently. "But what kind of example am I setting if I teach her that safety matters more than dignity? That you should let powerful people control you because fighting back is too dangerous?" Jennifer was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Do you remember what Sarah told you right before she died?" Ethan did. He'd replayed that conversation 1,000 times in the dark hours when sleep wouldn't come. Sarah's voice, weak but fierce, making him promise things he wasn't sure he could keep. "She said not to let grief make me small," Ethan said softly. "She said I was the best mechanic she'd ever known, the best father Lily could ask for, and that I needed to remember that even when everything hurt, especially when everything hurt." "And what have you been doing for 2 years?" "Making myself small, letting grief win." Ethan looked at his sister. "But tonight, for a couple of hours, I wasn't small. I was the person Sarah fell in love with, the person my dad taught everything he knew, the person who could fix what other people said was broken beyond repair. And it scared the hell out of you. Terrified me. Still does." He stood up, his knees creaking. "But I think I'm more scared of going back to being invisible, of teaching Lily that the right way to survive is to hide who you are." Jennifer studied him with the same assessing look she'd given him when they were kids, and he was about to do something either brilliant or catastrophically stupid. "You know you can stay here, right? If you need time to figure things out, the couch folds out. It's not ideal, but thank you, really. But I need to handle this myself. Need to show Lily that we can handle things ourselves." "Stubborn idiot! Runs in the family." Lily stirred on the couch, her eyes fluttering open. When she saw Ethan, her face lit up with a smile that made every stupid decision worth it. "Daddy, I saw you on the internet. You fixed a really big machine." "I did, baby. How was that science project?" "It's about electricity. Mrs. Henderson says I'm doing really good." She sat up, fully awake now despite the hour. "Daddy, were you scared when all those people were watching?" Ethan sat beside her, and Lily immediately curled into his side, her small, warm weight familiar and grounding. "Yeah, I was scared, but you know what? Sometimes you have to do scary things. Sometimes being brave just means doing the thing even when you're afraid. Like when I had to do my presentation in front of the whole class? Exactly like that." Lily yawned, already drifting back towards sleep. Daddy, are we going to be okay? It was the question she'd been asking in various forms for 2 years, since her mother died, since they lost the house, since everything stable became uncertain, and Ethan had been answering with careful reassurances, vague promises, whatever would make her feel safe without committing to specifics he couldn't guarantee. This time, he told the truth. I don't know, Lily. Things might be hard for a while, but I promise you this. I'm not going to hide anymore. I'm going to fight for us. Really fight. Not just survive, but actually try to build something better. Okay? Okay, Daddy. She was almost asleep again. I love you. I love you too, baby girl. Ethan stayed on the couch until Lily's breathing deepened into sleep, until he was sure she'd slipped back into dreams. Then he carefully extracted himself, tucked the blanket around her, and joined Jennifer in the kitchen where she was making coffee despite the late hour. So, what's the actual plan? Jennifer asked, sliding a mug across the counter. Honestly, I'm still figuring it out, but I got some messages tonight, investors wanting to talk, media wanting interviews, engineers wanting to hire me for consulting work. He pulled out his phone, scrolled through the notifications he'd been ignoring. Dozens of them. Hundreds, maybe. This viral moment, maybe it's an opportunity. Maybe I can turn it into something real. Or maybe it's 15 minutes of fame that disappears and leaves you worse off than before. Maybe, but I have to try. Have to believe that showing people what I can do will lead somewhere. Ethan sipped the coffee. It was terrible. Jennifer had never learned to make decent coffee. He drank it anyway. Sarah always said I was too good at fixing things to spend my life hiding that talent. Tonight I got reminded of that. Painfully, publicly, but reminded nonetheless. His phone rang. At 4 a.m. Ethan almost ignored it, but the caller ID showed Robert Chen, the investor who'd texted earlier. Are you actually calling me at 4 in the morning? Ethan answered. Mr. Cole, my apologies for the hour. I'm calling from Singapore, different time zone. The voice was smooth, educated, carrying the kind of confidence that came with having more money than some countries. I watched your performance tonight with great interest. What you did was remarkable. Not just the technical solution, but the way you handled Miranda Vale's attempted humiliation. That showed character. Or stupidity, jury's still out. Chen laughed. Sometimes they're the same thing. Mr. Cole, I'm going to be direct. I invest in overlooked opportunities. Companies, technologies, people. You are exactly the kind of opportunity I'm interested in. I'm not a company or a technology. No, you're something more interesting. You're a story that challenges assumptions about expertise, about value, about who deserves to be heard, and you have skills that are genuinely valuable. That combination is rare. Ethan put the phone on speaker so Jennifer could hear. She raised her eyebrows. What exactly are you proposing? I want to fund you. Not hire you. Fund you. Help you start a new venture, whatever that looks like. Consulting firm, engineering practice, training program, doesn't matter. You have visibility right now. That's capital. But capital evaporates quickly without structure. I can provide the structure. In exchange for what? Equity, advisory role, or say, first right of refusal on any IP you develop. Standard terms. Chen paused. I should mention that I'm also on the board of Vanguard Technologies. I saw what Miranda tried to do to you tonight. I didn't like it. She's brilliant but ruthless, and sometimes ruthlessness crosses into cruelty. I'd like to help you land on your feet. Consider it an investment in fairness. Jennifer was making frantic gestures. Say, yes, what are you waiting for? Take the money. But Ethan had learned to be cautious about offers that sounded too good. Why me? There are thousands of talented people who need funding. Because you're trending on Twitter. Because 380,000 people watched you solve an impossible problem. Because human interest stories drive engagement, and engaged audiences drive value. Chen's voice became more serious. But also because I built my first company in my garage while working night shifts at a factory. I know what it's like to have skills that credentials don't capture. I want to help people like us. Jennifer was practically climbing across the counter, trying to grab the phone and accept on Ethan's behalf. He held up a hand. I need time to think about it. to get advice, to make sure I'm not jumping from one trap into another. Smart. I respect that. Take 72 hours. My assistant will send you term sheets and references. Do your due diligence, then we'll talk. Chen paused. Oh, and Mr. Cole, Miranda Vale is going to come after you. Her ego won't let this stand. When she does, call me. I have resources that can help. The line went dead. Ethan stared at his phone like it might explode. Did that just happen? Jennifer asked. Did a billionaire investor just offer to fund you at 4 a.m? Apparently. And you didn't immediately say yes because I don't trust things that sound too good. Because I've learned that every offer comes with hidden costs. Because, Ethan rubbed his face. Because I'm scared, Jennifer. I'm terrified that I'll accept help and it'll turn out to be another version of what Miranda tried. Another cage with better decoration. Or maybe it's genuine. Maybe someone actually wants to help. Maybe. Ethan finished the terrible coffee. I should get Lily home. She has school in 5 hours. Leave her. She's asleep. Come get her after you've rested. You look like death. Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to insist on taking his daughter home where she belonged. But Jennifer was right. He was exhausted and running on adrenaline fumes and in no state to parent effectively. Okay, thank you for everything. That's what family does. We catch each other when we fall. Jennifer walked him to the door. Ethan, whatever you decide about Chen's offer, about what comes next, I'm proud of you for standing up to Miranda, for remembering who you are. Sarah would be proud too. The words hit harder than Ethan expected. He hugged his sister, maybe holding on a little too long, then stepped out into the pre-dawn darkness. The walk back to his apartment took 15 minutes. The building was quiet, most residents still asleep. Ethan climbed the 3 flights of stairs. The elevator had been broken for 2 weeks, and let himself into the 1-bedroom unit that had been home for 6 months. It was small, cramped. The carpet was stained and the walls were thin, and he could hear his neighbors fighting at 2 a.m. most nights. But it was clean, safe. Theirs. Lily's drawings covered the refrigerator, flowers and houses and stick figures labeled Me and Daddy. Her backpack sat by the door, ready for school. Her science project materials were spread across the kitchen table, batteries and wires and a small light bulb carefully arranged. Ethan sat at the table and looked at his daughter's work. She was trying to build a circuit, to understand how electricity flowed, to grasp the invisible forces that made things work, just like her father, just like her grandfather before him. Maybe that was the real inheritance, not the shop or the tools or even the knowledge, but the curiosity, the desire to understand, the refusal to accept that something was broken beyond fixing. His phone buzzed. Another message. This one from Sarah Rodriguez. I know it's late and you probably need space, but I wanted you to know, half the engineering team is talking about quitting in protest of how Miranda treated you. She's losing control. You're winning even though you walked away. Sleep well. Ethan smiled despite his exhaustion. He wasn't trying to win. He'd never been trying to win. He was just trying to survive with dignity and tact, to be a father Lily could be proud of, to honor Sarah's memory by not letting grief make him small. But maybe, just maybe, survival and dignity and honor looked like winning when you'd been invisible for so long. He fell into bed with his clothes still on, too tired to even brush his teeth. The last thought before sleep claimed him was of Lily's face when she'd seen the video, the pride in her eyes, the way she'd called him a superhero. Tomorrow would bring problems. Miranda's revenge, financial uncertainty, difficult decisions about offers that might be traps. But tonight, Ethan Cole had been seen, had been himself, had shown his daughter that hiding wasn't the only way to survive. And that, he thought, as consciousness faded, was worth every terrifying consequence still to come. Ethan woke to sunlight streaming through his apartment window and the sound of his phone vibrating itself off the nightstand. He caught it before it hit the floor, squinting at the screen. 11:47 a.m. He'd slept through his alarm, through the morning, through half the day. His body had simply shut down after running on fumes for too long. The phone showed 63 missed calls, 47 text messages. Emails flooding in faster than he could count. His Twitter notifications had maxed out at 999 plus, The viral moment hadn't faded overnight. If anything, it had grown. Ethan scrolled through the messages with growing disbelief. Job offers from 3 different engineering firms. Interview requests from CNN, NBC, Fox News, and a dozen podcasts he'd never heard of. Someone wanted to option his life story for a movie. A literary agent was interested in a book deal. A motivational speaking company offered $15,000 for a single 1-hour presentation. It was surreal. Yesterday he'd been invisible. Today the world wanted pieces of him he wasn't sure existed. One message stood out, marked urgent. From an email address he didn't recognize, but a name he knew too well. Mr. Cole, this is Richard Hammond, General Counsel for Vanguard Technologies. We need to discuss your employment status and certain intellectual property concerns related to last night's engine repair. Please contact our office immediately to schedule a meeting. This is a time-sensitive legal matter. There it was. Miranda's revenge, wrapped in lawyer speak and corporate threats. Ethan had been waiting for it, but seeing the words still made his stomach clench. Intellectual property concerns. That was how they'd frame it. He'd solved their problem while technically employed by Vanguard, which meant they could argue ownership of the solution, could claim he'd stolen company resources or used proprietary information, could destroy him with legal fees even if they ultimately lost. His phone rang, Robert Chen's number. Ethan answered on the 3rd ring. Mr. Cole, I hope I didn't wake you. Already awake, already drowning in messages. Ethan moved to his kitchen, desperate for coffee. Vanguard's lawyers just threatened me with IP litigation. I know. Hammond copied me on the email. He does that when he wants board members to apply pressure. Chen's voice was calm, almost amused. He's bluffing. The solution you provided wasn't proprietary. You used publicly available calibration techniques and your own expertise. They have no case. They don't need a case. They just need enough money to bury me in legal proceedings I can't afford, which is why you need representation. I'm sending you contact information for Sarah Volkov. She's the best IP attorney in Michigan, possibly the country. She's also expensive, but I'll cover the retainer. Consider it part of my investment offer. Ethan poured water into his ancient coffee maker, watching it drip with agonizing slowness. You're very confident I'm going to accept your offer. I'm confident that you need help right now, whether you accept the broader partnership or not. Miranda Vale is vindictive. She's already spreading stories to investors that you sabotaged the engine first and then fixed it to make yourself look good. That's insane. There's video evidence of everything, which shows you had access to the engine during your cleaning shifts, which means you theoretically could have tampered with it. Chen paused. I'm not saying the accusation will stick. I'm saying she's fighting dirty because you embarrassed her. You need to fight back. Ethan's coffee finished brewing. He poured a cup. Black, no sugar, the same way his father had drunk it, the same way he'd been drinking it for 25 years. Some habits were too deep to break. What do you suggest? First, meet with Volkov. Get legal protection in place. Second, stop ignoring the media requests. Control your narrative before Miranda controls it for you, sir. Third, consider my offer seriously. You're sitting on cultural capital right now, the viral janitor genius story. But capital has a shelf life. We need to convert attention into something sustainable. You make it sound like a business transaction. Because it is. Sentiment and strategy aren't mutually exclusive. Chen's tone shifted, became more personal. Look, I've been where you are. Not exactly, but close enough. I know what it's like to have one shot at changing your circumstances. To know that if you don't move fast and smart, the window closes and you're back to where you started, except worse, because now you know what you missed. Ethan drank his coffee, thinking. Chen was right about the window. Stories like his, the underdog who shocked the world, had a limited lifespan. A week, maybe 2, before the internet moved on to the next thing. If he was going to leverage this moment, he had to do it now. Send me Volkov's information and the term sheets. I'll read everything and we'll talk tomorrow. Smart. One more thing. There's a board meeting at Vanguard tonight. Emergency session. Miranda's trying to contain the damage from last night. I'm going to bring up your treatment as a governance issue. Might get uncomfortable for her. I don't need you to fight my battles. I'm not fighting your battle. I'm fighting for the kind of company I want to invest in, one that values talent regardless of where it comes from. Your situation just happens to be a perfect test case. Chen hung up before Ethan could respond. The apartment felt too small suddenly, too quiet. Ethan needed to move, to think, to do something other than stare at his phone watching his life transform in real time. He needed to pick up Lily from school in 3 hours. Needed to figure out what to tell her about the job, about the uncertainty, about why Daddy's face was suddenly all over the internet. His phone rang again, Jennifer this time. "Have you seen the news?" she asked without preamble. "I've been avoiding it." "Stop avoiding it. Turn on channel 7. Ethan found the remote buried under yesterday's mail. The TV flickered to life, and there he was on the screen. Footage from last night's live stream, Ethan's hands moving over the engine with careful precision. The chyron read, "Janitor Genius, the man who humbled Silicon Valley." The anchor was interviewing someone. Ethan turned up the volume. "Remarkable story that speaks to fundamental questions about expertise and credibility," the guest was saying, a professor from Wayne State based on the subtitle. What Ethan Cole demonstrated wasn't just technical knowledge, but a different way of knowing. Embodied expertise, we call it in the literature. Knowledge that comes from hands-on experience rather than abstract study. "But surely formal education has value," the anchor countered. "Of course. But we've created a system where credentials have become a gatekeeper, where the only valid knowledge is the kind you pay a university to certify. Mr. Cole's story challenges that. It suggests that wisdom can come from other sources, apprenticeship, lived experience, generational knowledge passed from father to son." The camera cut to different footage. Miranda Vale's face during the engine test, shock transforming to something uglier as she realized what was happening. The internet had isolated that moment, turned it into a meme. Ethan had seen it scrolling through Twitter, dozens of jokes about the expression of someone watching their worldview collapse in real time. "Jesus," Ethan muttered. "It gets better," Jennifer said. "Or worse, depending on your perspective. Keep watching." The segment shifted to an interview. Not with Ethan, he hadn't talked to any reporters, but with David Chen, the engineer from last night. "Ethan Cole is exactly the kind of person our industry needs," Chen was telling the camera. "We've become so focused on pedigree and credentials that we've forgotten to value practical knowledge. Last night was humbling for all of us. We saw someone with supposedly less education solve a problem we couldn't touch. That should make us question our assumptions." Another cut. Sarah Rodriguez this time, speaking to a different reporter. "What happened to Ethan was cruel and it was wrong. Miranda Vale tried to humiliate someone she viewed as beneath her, and instead he saved our company. Now she's retaliating with legal threats because her ego can't handle being wrong. It's disgusting, and a lot of us are considering whether we want to work for someone like that." "Holy shit," Ethan said. "She just publicly called out the CEO." "Half the engineering team did," Jennifer replied. "It's all over LinkedIn. People are posting about Miranda's management style, about how she treats people she considers inferior. It's turning into a whole thing about workplace culture and executive accountability." Ethan sat down hard on his couch. This wasn't just about him anymore. His small act of defiance had lit a fuse under something much larger. Resentments that had been building, frustrations people had been swallowing. He'd become a symbol for something he hadn't intended to represent. "This is spiraling," he said quietly. "It's been spiraling since you walked out of Miranda's office. The question is what you do about it." What could he do? He was one person, a single dad with $300 in savings and a daughter who needed stability. He couldn't lead a revolution. He couldn't be responsible for other people's career decisions. He just wanted to fix things and take care of Lily and maybe, possibly, rebuild something resembling the life he'd lost. But the world apparently had other plans. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Mr. Cole, this is Marcus Williams. I'm a machinist at Vanguard, work in the fabrication shop. I've been there 11 years. I just wanted to say thank you. What you did last night, standing up to Miranda, it mattered. A lot of us have been putting up with her treatment because we need our jobs. Seeing someone refuse to be owned, even when it cost you everything, that meant something. You're braver than most of us." Ethan stared at the message, something tight forming in his chest. He'd thought his decision to walk away was personal, selfish even, about his own dignity, his own refusal to be controlled. He hadn't considered that other people were watching, that his choice might matter to someone beyond himself and Lily. Another message came in, then another. Workers from Vanguard, people he'd passed in hallways without speaking, faces he'd cleaned up after for 6 months. They were thanking him, telling him stories about their own experiences with Miranda's cruelty, confessing that they'd wanted to quit but couldn't afford to, admitting that watching him walk away had made them feel less alone. "Jennifer, I have to go," Ethan said suddenly. "I need to think, need to figure out what the hell I'm supposed to do with all of this." "Just don't do anything stupid. Can't promise that. Stupid seems to be my specialty lately." He ended the call before she could argue. The next 3 hours passed in a blur of reading and research. Ethan pulled up everything he could find about Robert Chen. The investor checked out, self-made billionaire, started 5 companies, known for backing unconventional founders. Articles described him as ruthless but fair, demanding but supportive. People who'd worked with him said he kept his promises. The term sheets Chen had sent were surprisingly straightforward. Chen would provide initial funding, $250,000, in exchange for 20% equity in whatever company Ethan chose to form. Standard investor protections, but nothing predatory. Nothing that would trap Ethan if things went wrong. Sarah Volkov's credentials were even more impressive. She'd represented engineers in IP disputes against Google, Apple, Microsoft. Won most of them. Her retainer alone was $15,000, which Ethan could never afford on his own, but Chen had already wired the money to her firm. Ethan was still reading when his alarm went off. Time to get Lily from school. He grabbed his jacket, the same worn canvas thing he'd been wearing for 3 years, and headed out. The walk to Lily's elementary school usually took 20 minutes. It gave Ethan time to decompress between whatever chaos the day had brought and the moment he had to be present for his daughter. Today, he needed every minute of that walk to figure out what to tell her. Lily was waiting on the steps with her teacher, Mrs. Henderson, when Ethan arrived. The moment she saw him, she ran over, backpack bouncing. "Daddy! Everyone at school saw the video. Tyler said his dad showed it at breakfast and his dad said you were awesome." She grabbed his hand, practically vibrating with excitement. "Mrs. Henderson says you're famous." Mrs. Henderson approached with a smile that looked slightly overwhelmed. "Mr. Cole, I hope it's okay that I let Lily watch part of the coverage during current events. It seemed relevant." "It's fine. Thank you for looking out for her." "Of course." Mrs. Henderson hesitated. "I also wanted to say, what you did took real courage. My sister works at Vanguard, actually, in accounting. She's been dealing with Miranda Vale's management style for years. Seeing someone stand up to it, well, it mattered to her, to a lot of people." There it was again, that weight of other people's hope, pressing down on Ethan's shoulders like gravity he hadn't asked for. He walked Lily home, listening to her chatter about school and the video and how her friend Emma thought it was so cool that Lily's dad was a genius. She didn't understand what had actually happened, didn't grasp the complexity, the conflict, the uncertainty. She just saw her father being exceptional at something, being recognized, being visible. It was the same look he'd seen in Sarah's eyes 15 years ago when she'd first visited his shop. Pride, belief, the certainty that he was capable of remarkable things if he just let himself try. "Daddy, are you still going to be a janitor?" Lily asked as they climbed the stairs to their apartment. "I don't think so, baby. Things are changing. I'm not sure exactly how yet, but changing." "Good. You're too smart to just clean floors. Mom always said that." The casual mention of Sarah hit Ethan like a physical blow. Lily rarely talked about her mother directly. The grief was still too big, too present. But sometimes she'd drop these small references, testing whether it was safe to remember, whether Daddy could handle hearing Sarah's name without breaking. "Your mom was right about a lot of things," Ethan said carefully. "What else did she say?" "She said you could fix anything, not just engines and stuff, but problems. That you always found a way." Lily looked up at him with eyes that were Sarah's eyes, dark and knowing. "She said that's what made you special. You never gave up on broken things." Ethan had to stop walking, had to crouch down so he was eye level with his daughter, right there in the hallway of their rundown apartment building. "Lily, I need to tell you something. There's going to be some uncertainty for a while, about jobs and money and where we live. Some things might be scary or confusing, but I promise you, I'm going to figure it out, okay? I know, Daddy, you always do. She said it with complete faith, the kind of trust that made Ethan want to be worthy of it. They spent the afternoon on Lily's science project, building the circuit she'd been planning. Ethan showed her how to connect the wires properly, how to test the battery's charge, how to troubleshoot when the bulb didn't light immediately. He watched her face as understanding clicked into place, watched her realize that electricity wasn't magic, but something knowable, something she could control. I did it! Lily shrieked when the bulb finally glowed. Daddy, I made electricity! You absolutely did! I'm so proud of you! She beamed at him. Can we show Aunt Jennifer? Later. Right now I need to make some phone calls. Adult stuff. Think you can work on your homework while I do that? Lily settled at the table with her math worksheet while Ethan stepped into the bedroom. He called Sarah Volkov first. She answered on the second ring, her voice crisp and efficient. Mr. Cole, I've been expecting your call. I've already reviewed the letter from Vanguard's counsel. It's intimidation theater, nothing more. They're hoping you'll panic and sign away any claim to credit for the repair. Don't. What are they actually claiming? That any work performed during your employment belongs to the company. Technically true for employees in creative or technical roles, but you were facilities maintenance. The engine repair wasn't in your job description. They'd have to prove you were acting in an engineering capacity, which contradicts their own employment classification of you as a janitor. Ethan felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. So they can't win. Not in court, but they can make your life difficult for 6 to 12 months while we fight it. Depositions, discovery, legal fees. It's warfare by attrition. How do we stop it? We don't fight defensively. We go on offense. Volkov's tone sharpened with something like anticipation. Robert Chen mentioned you might be open to media appearances. If you are, we use that. We make this a public relations disaster for Vanguard. We force them to either back down or look like the bullies they're being. I don't want to be a media spectacle. Too late. You already are. The question is whether you control the narrative or let Miranda Vale control it for you. Volkov paused. Mr. Cole, I've represented a lot of brilliant people who got crushed by corporations with deeper pockets. The ones who survived were the ones who understood that legal battles aren't just fought in courtrooms anymore. They're fought in the court of public opinion, and right now, public opinion is on your side. Ethan thought about the messages from Vanguard workers, about the news coverage, about the professor calling him a symbol of embodied expertise. What would you need me to do? Interviews, controlled, strategic. We tell your story. Single father, widow, medical bankruptcy, working night shifts to survive. We emphasize that you were publicly humiliated by a billionaire CEO who then tried to own you when you proved your worth. We make Miranda Vale the villain and you the hero. It's not hard because it's basically the truth. It feels manipulative. It's strategic. There's a difference. Volkov's voice softened slightly. Look, I get it. You want to be a private person. You want to fix things and raise your daughter and not be a symbol for larger social issues. But you don't get that choice anymore. Miranda made you public when she live-streamed your humiliation. Now you get to decide how that publicity works for or against you. Ethan walked to the window, looking out at the Detroit skyline. Somewhere in one of those towers, Miranda Vale was probably planning her next move. Somewhere else, Robert Chen was maneuvering behind the scenes. And here Ethan stood, caught between forces he didn't fully understand, trying to make decisions that would affect not just his future, but Lily's. Set up the interviews, he said finally. But I have conditions. No sensationalism, no crying on camera, no making my wife's death into entertainment. I'll tell the story, but I'll tell it with dignity. Agreed. I'll coordinate with the producers. We'll start with something credible. 60 Minutes or Frontline. Build from there. Volkov paused. You're making the right choice. I know it doesn't feel like it, but you are. After the call ended, Ethan stood at the window for a long moment. In the other room, Lily was singing to herself while she worked on math problems. The sound was ordinary, domestic, the background music of a life he'd fought so hard to maintain. He called Robert Chen. Mr. Cole. Good timing. I'm about to head into the board meeting. I want to accept your offer, with modifications. I'm listening. I don't want this to be about me building a company that makes you money. I want it to be about creating opportunities for people like me. People with skills that credentials don't capture. People who've been overlooked because they don't fit the Silicon Valley mold. That's exactly what I'm hoping for. What kind of modifications? Ethan took a breath. I want to start a consulting and training operation. We take on engineering problems from companies that are stuck, but we staff the teams with non-traditional experts, mechanics, machinists, technicians, people who know how things actually work, not just how they're supposed to work in theory. And we train the next generation the same way. Apprenticeship model, real-world knowledge. There was a pause, then Chen said quietly, "That's brilliant. It's exactly the kind of disruptive model that challenges industry assumptions while filling a genuine need. I'm in. Full funding, 20% equity, and I'll help you recruit the first clients. One more thing, I want a board seat. Not for me, for someone who represents the workers' interests. Someone who makes sure this doesn't turn into another corporation that exploits the people it's supposed to help." Done. We'll structure it as a B Corp, social mission written into the bylaws. Anything else? Ethan looked at Lily's drawings on the refrigerator. Yeah, I need to be home for dinner with my daughter every night. No exceptions. This doesn't work if I become the kind of father who's too busy for the people who matter. Chen laughed. I respect that. We have a deal, Mr. Cole. I'll have my attorneys draw up the paperwork. In the meantime, prepare yourself. The board meeting tonight is going to be interesting, and Miranda won't go down quietly. She's going to fight dirty. Let her fight. I'm done running. The rest of the afternoon passed in a strange mixture of ordinary and surreal. Ethan helped Lily with homework, made dinner, spaghetti with sauce from a jar, nothing fancy, and gave her a bath. Normal father-daughter routines, except his phone kept buzzing with messages from lawyers and reporters and investors. At 8 p.m., after Lily was in bed, Ethan's phone rang. Robert Chen. You're going to want to see this. Chen sent a link. It was a live stream. The Vanguard Technologies board meeting being broadcast on the company's website. Ethan could see Miranda at the head of the conference table, her expression controlled but her body language radiating tension. The board members were arrayed around her, 12 faces, mostly men, all wearing expensive suits and expressions ranging from concerned to hostile. Chen's voice came through the stream. I'd like to address the incident from last night, specifically the treatment of Mr. Ethan Cole. Miranda's jaw tightened. That's an internal HR matter, not appropriate for board discussion. It became a board matter when you live-streamed it to 400,000 people. Chen's tone was measured but firm. You publicly humiliated an employee, then attempted to coerce him into accepting terms he didn't want, then threatened him with legal action when he refused. This represents a significant governance issue and a potential liability for the company. Another board member spoke up. With respect, Mr. Chen, Miss Vale was addressing a critical engineering failure. The unconventional method she employed ultimately led to a solution. The solution came from Mr. Cole, not from Miss Vale's method, and the unconventional method you're describing is better characterized as workplace bullying. Chen pulled up something on the screen. Ethan couldn't see what. I've received 17 complaints from Vanguard employees in the last 12 hours, all describing similar patterns of behavior. Public humiliation, threats, retaliation against those who speak up. Miranda stood abruptly. This is a coordinated attack. Cole obviously put people up to this as revenge for what? Fixing the engine you couldn't fix? Saving the military contract? Or refusing to be owned? Chen's voice hardened. Miranda, you built this company into something remarkable, but your leadership style has become toxic. The board needs to address this before it destroys everything you've created. The meeting dissolved into crosstalk. Board members arguing, Miranda defending herself, Chen pressing his case. Ethan watched it unfold with a strange detachment. This was about him, but it was also bigger than him. It was about power and accountability, and whether someone could be brilliant and successful and still fundamentally wrong about how to treat people. His phone rang. Different number. He answered without thinking. Mr. Cole, a woman's voice trembling slightly. This is Catherine Martinez. I was Miranda Vale's executive assistant. I just resigned. Live during the board meeting. I couldn't do it anymore. I'm sorry, I don't understand why you're calling me. Because I have information about what Miranda's planning. She's not going to let this go. She's hiring a private investigator to dig into your background, looking for anything she can use to discredit you. Unpaid debts, legal issues, anything that makes you look unreliable. Martinez took a shaky breath. I thought you should know. I thought you deserved a warning. Ethan's mouth went dry. Why are you telling me this? You worked for her for 4 years. 4 years of watching her destroy people who got in her way. I told myself it was just business, just the cost of working at that level. But what she tried to do to you, what she's still trying to do, it's not business, it's cruelty, and I can't be part of it anymore. What exactly is she looking for? Everything. Medical records, financial history, your late wife's death, your daughter's school records. She's looking for leverage, something that makes you back down or makes the public stop sympathizing with you. Martinez paused. Is there anything she could find that would hurt you? Ethan thought about medical bankruptcy, about the foreclosure, about the desperate 18 months after Sarah died when he'd taken any work he could find, including some cash under the table jobs that probably weren't entirely legal. Nothing criminal, nothing terrible, but enough to look bad if framed correctly. There's always something, he said quietly. Everyone's got vulnerabilities if you look hard enough. Then you need to get ahead of it. Tell your story first before she twists it into something ugly. Martinez's voice became urgent. Mr. Cole, I've seen Miranda destroy people. Talented, good people who made the mistake of challenging her. She's systematic about it. She finds the pressure points and pushes until you break. Don't let her do that to you. The call ended. Ethan sat in the darkness of his living room, listening to Lily's soft breathing from the bedroom, watching the board meeting continue to unravel on his laptop screen. Everything was accelerating. The viral moment, the legal threats, the media interest, the board revolt, Miranda's private investigation, forces in motion that he'd set off but couldn't control. He'd thought walking away from her office was the end of something. Turned out it was just the beginning. His phone rang again. Sarah Volkov. I just got a call from a source at Vanguard. Miranda's hiring private investigators. We need to accelerate our media strategy. Get your story out before she controls the narrative. I know, her former assistant just called me. Catherine Martinez? She's credible. If she's willing to go on record about Miranda's behavior, that's huge. Volkov's mind was clearly racing. Okay, new plan. I've got a producer from 60 Minutes who's been begging for access. We do a full interview. Tell everything, the medical bills, the bankruptcy, the grief, the night shifts. We show them the human being behind the viral moment. Make it impossible for Miranda to paint you as the villain. When? Tomorrow. They can have a crew in Detroit by afternoon. Tomorrow. Less than 24 hours to prepare for what would probably be the most important interview of his life. The moment that would define how the world saw him, how his story would be remembered, whether he'd be a symbol of hope or just another footnote in tech industry drama. Do it, Ethan said. Set it up. He spent the next hour preparing, writing down the timeline of Sarah's illness, the medical bills, the business closure. The facts were painful but clear. He'd done nothing wrong except fail to afford American health care, fail to prevent his wife from dying, fail to save the business his father had built. Around midnight, Ethan's phone lit up with a news alert. The headline made his breath catch. Vanguard Technologies CEO. Miranda Vale placed on administrative leave following board vote. He clicked through to the article, scanning rapidly. The board had voted 7-5 to remove Miranda from day-to-day operations pending an investigation into workplace conduct. Robert Chen had been appointed interim CEO. Catherine Martinez's resignation had apparently triggered a cascade of others. 3 more executives had walked out during the meeting, all citing Miranda's management style. The article included a statement from Chen. Vanguard Technologies was built on innovation and excellence. But excellence cannot come at the cost of human dignity. We're committed to creating a workplace culture that values all contributors, regardless of their title or credentials. Ethan stared at the words, trying to process what they meant. He'd walked away from Miranda's office less than 24 hours ago, And already the entire power structure of a $7 billion company had shifted. He hadn't meant to start a revolution. He just wanted to keep his dignity intact. His phone rang. He almost didn't answer, exhausted by the constant barrage of calls, but the number was Jennifer's. "Are you seeing this?" she asked immediately. "Just read the article." "This is insane. You took down a CEO, a billionaire CEO, in one day." "I didn't take her down. The board did. Her own behavior did. Her behavior that you exposed. Her cruelty that you refused to accept." Jennifer's voice carried a mix of pride and worry. "Ethan, you realize this makes you even more of a target, right? Miranda Vale doesn't strike me as someone who takes losing gracefully. Catherine Martinez already warned me. She's hiring investigators. Then you need protection, security, something." Ethan looked toward Lily's bedroom, where his daughter slept peacefully, unaware that her father had somehow become the center of a corporate war. "I need to keep Lily safe. That's what I need." "Then take Chen's money, hire security, get a lawyer who can fight back. Stop trying to handle this alone." She was right. Ethan had spent 2 years handling everything alone because he'd thought asking for help was the same as admitting defeat. But this was bigger than pride now. This was about protecting his daughter from fallout he'd never intended to create. "I'm doing the 60 Minutes interview tomorrow," he told Jennifer, "getting the full story out before Miranda can twist it." "Good. But Ethan, be careful. The truth is powerful, but it's also vulnerable. Once you share it, you can't control how people use it." After they hung up, Ethan tried to sleep, but his mind wouldn't quiet. He kept thinking about Miranda's face when the engine had started running, the shock and fury and something else. Betrayal, maybe. Like he'd broken an unspoken rule by being competent when he was supposed to be invisible. He understood that feeling better than he wanted to admit. When Sarah had gotten sick, when the medical bills had started piling up, when the insurance company had denied the experimental treatment that might have saved her, Ethan had felt that same sense of betrayal. The system was supposed to work. You paid your premiums, you followed the rules, you did everything right, and in exchange the system protected you. Except it didn't. Not always. Not for everyone. Maybe that's what connected him to all those Vanguard workers who'd been sending messages. They'd followed the rules too. Gotten the degrees, taken the jobs, accepted the hierarchy, and still found themselves at the mercy of someone who saw them as interchangeable parts rather than human beings. Ethan finally drifted off around 2 a.m., only to wake 3 hours later to Lily climbing into bed with him. "Daddy, I had a bad dream." He pulled her close, breathing in the apple-scented shampoo from her bath. "Want to talk about it?" "We had to move again, to somewhere far away, and I couldn't find you." Her voice was small, frightened in the way that only children's voices could be. "Hey, I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." Ethan stroked her hair. "And we're not moving. We're staying right here in Detroit, I promise." "But what if the bad lady makes us move? The one from your work?" Ethan's chest tightened. He'd tried so hard to shield Lily from the adult chaos, but kids picked up more than you thought they did. "The bad lady doesn't have that power, baby. Nobody does. We're okay." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." He wasn't, not entirely, but Lily needed certainty more than she needed truth right now. She fell back asleep against his shoulder. Ethan lay awake, watching the pre-dawn light filter through the cheap blinds, thinking about promises and power and the difference between the two. At 7 a.m., Sarah Volkov called with final details for the interview. The 60 Minutes crew would arrive at 2 p.m. They wanted to film in Ethan's apartment, at Lily's school, maybe at the site of his old repair shop if he was comfortable with that. "They're going to ask about Sarah, your wife," Volkov said carefully. "About her death, the medical bills, the bankruptcy. It's going to be painful, but it's also the emotional core of your story. The reason you ended up pushing a mop at Vanguard instead of running your own business." "I know." Ethan's voice was rough with exhaustion. "I'll handle it." "You don't have to answer anything you're not comfortable with." "No, I do." Jennifer was right. The truth is the only weapon I have. Miranda's going to dig all this up anyway. Better that I tell it myself in my own words before she turns it into ammunition. The morning passed in a blur of preparation. Ethan cleaned the apartment, which was already clean, but he needed something to do with his hands. He picked Lily up from Jennifer's, told her that some people were coming to interview Daddy for TV, that she didn't have to talk to them if she didn't want to. "Will I be on TV?" Lily asked, eyes wide. "Maybe. Just for a minute. They want to see our normal life." "Our life isn't normal, Daddy. We live in a tiny apartment and you were on the internet fixing a machine." Ethan laughed despite the tension. "Fair point. Our new normal, then." The 60 Minutes crew arrived exactly at 2 p.m., 3 people with professional cameras and lighting equipment that seemed absurdly elaborate for the small space. The producer was a woman in her 40s named Diana Chang, who had warm eyes and a direct manner that immediately put Ethan at ease. "Thank you for doing this," she said, shaking his hand. "Your story resonates with a lot of people. The single parent working multiple jobs, the medical bankruptcy, the system that punishes people for getting sick. That's America for millions of families." "I didn't mean to become a symbol." "The best symbols never do." Diana gestured to the couch. "Let's start with the basics. Tell me about your wife." The interview lasted 3 hours. Diana asked questions that cut straight to bone. How Sarah had died, what it felt like to watch the medical bills destroy everything they'd built, the moment he'd decided to close the shop, the first night shift as a janitor when he'd realized how far he'd fallen. Ethan answered honestly. About the shame of bankruptcy, the grief that felt like drowning, the terrifying responsibility of raising Lily alone. About the night he'd seriously considered giving up, letting his sister raise Lily because maybe she deserved better than a broken father in a one-bedroom apartment. "What stopped you?" Diana asked gently. "Lily did. She came into my room one night, maybe 3 months after Sarah died, and she said, 'Daddy, are you going to leave too?' And I realized that I couldn't. That loving her meant staying, even when staying hurt, especially when staying hurt." Diana's eyes were wet. The cameraman wiped his face. This wasn't just good television. This was human connection, the kind that couldn't be manufactured or scripted. They filmed B-roll of Ethan and Lily making dinner together, of the apartment with its modest furniture and Lily's artwork on the walls. They drove to the shuttered building that used to house Cole and Son Automotive, now just an empty shell with broken windows and graffiti. Ethan stood in front of it, remembering. His father teaching him to rebuild an engine when he was 12. Sarah bringing him lunch during long days when he'd been trying to build the business. The pride he'd felt when customers drove 50 miles because they trusted his work. "What would your father think of what you did at Vanguard?" Diana asked. "He'd say I should have done it without all the drama." Ethan smiled. He was a quiet man, believed in letting the work speak for itself. But he also believed that everyone deserved respect, regardless of their job title. He taught me that the janitor knew things the CEO didn't, that wisdom came from paying attention, not from credentials. "Is that what you were doing? Paying attention?" "That's all I've ever done. Watch, listen, learn. My dad's voice is still in my head sometimes, telling me to listen to the machine before I touch it. That's what I did with Vanguard's engine. I listened to what it was trying to say." The interview wrapped around 6 p.m. Diana promised the segment would air within the week, that they'd send him the final cut before broadcast. As the crew packed up their equipment, she pulled Ethan aside. "Off the record? What Miranda Vale did to you was unconscionable. But what you did, walking away from her offer, refusing to be controlled, that's going to inspire a lot of people. I hope you're ready for that." "I'm not," Ethan admitted. "But I guess I don't have a choice." That evening, after Lily was asleep, Ethan sat down with Robert Chen's term sheets and actually read them carefully. The offer was generous, the terms fair, the structure designed to protect both parties. Chen wanted to build something real, not just exploit a viral moment. Ethan called him. "Mr. Cole, how did the interview go?" "Painful, necessary, both." Ethan took a breath. "I'm ready to sign your agreement, but I want to move fast, start recruiting, finding clients, building the team. This window won't stay open forever." "Agreed. I'll have the contracts ready by tomorrow. In the meantime, I have news from the Vanguard board meeting. I saw that Miranda was placed on leave. It's going to be permanent. The investigation revealed a pattern of behavior that the board can't ignore. She'll be offered a severance package and asked to resign." Chen paused. She's also being advised to drop the legal action against you. Her attorneys recognize it's unwinnable, and pursuing it makes her look vindictive. She won't drop it. This isn't about winning. It's about punishment. You're probably right, which is why we need to be prepared. Chen's voice became serious. Ethan, I need you to understand something. You've made a very powerful enemy. Miranda has resources, connections, and no moral constraints about using them. The private investigators Catherine warned you about are just the beginning. She's going to come at you from directions you can't anticipate. So what do? You build something she can't touch. A company with real value, real clients, real impact. You make yourself indispensable to enough people that attacking you means attacking them too. You create a network of protection through competence and relationships. It sounded exhausting. It also sounded necessary. How long do I have before she makes her next move? Days? Maybe a week? She's still dealing with the board situation, but once that resolves, her full attention will turn to destroying you. Chen was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry. I know you didn't ask for this fight. No, but I started it when I refused to stay invisible. Ethan looked around his small apartment, thinking about how much his life had changed in 48 hours. Might as well finish it. The next morning brought another wave of media coverage. The board's decision to remove Miranda had become a national story, part of larger conversations about tech culture, workplace abuse, and executive accountability. Ethan's name appeared in every article, the janitor who'd sparked a corporate revolution. His phone rang constantly. More job offers, more interview requests, more opportunities that sounded too good to be true. Sarah Volkov helped him navigate the flood, separating legitimate opportunities from scams and attention seekers. One call stood out. A woman named Dr. Rachel Kim, who ran a vocational training program for displaced workers. Mr. Cole, I've been following your story with great interest. What you're proposing, a consulting firm staffed by non-traditional experts, could change how we think about technical education. I'd like to partner with you. We have students who are brilliant hands-on learners, but struggle with traditional academics. They'd be perfect for your apprenticeship model. Ethan met with her that afternoon. Dr. Kim's facility was on Detroit's east side, a converted factory building now housing classrooms and workshops. She introduced him to students, people in their 20s through 50s, learning welding and machining and electrical work. People who'd lost manufacturing jobs when factories closed, who were rebuilding skills and lives. These folks have real knowledge, Dr. Kim explained, but employers won't look at them because they don't have engineering degrees. They're invisible, just like you were. Then let's make them visible. Ethan's mind was already racing with possibilities. What if we create a certification program? Not college degrees, but credentials that prove competence. We bring them into consulting projects, let them solve real problems, build portfolios of actual work. That could work. We'd need funding for, I have funding, $250,000 to start, more if we need it. Dr. Kim's eyes widened. You're serious? Completely serious. I'm done watching talented people get overlooked because the system doesn't recognize their value. They spent 3 hours sketching out a partnership. Dr. Kim would provide students and facilities. Ethan would bring clients and industry connections. Together, they'd create a pipeline from vocational training to high-level consulting work, proving that expertise came in forms that universities didn't monopolize. By the time Ethan left, they had the framework for something revolutionary. A new model for technical education and professional development. A direct challenge to the credential-obsessed culture that had made people like him invisible. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You think you've won. You haven't. You've just made yourself a bigger target. Enjoy your moment. It won't last. MV. Miranda. Dropping the pretense of professional distance, making the threat explicit. Ethan stared at the message, feeling the weight of what was coming. She wouldn't stop, wouldn't forgive, wouldn't rest until she destroyed him as thoroughly as he'd humiliated her. But Ethan had something Miranda didn't understand. He'd already lost everything once, already survived the worst that life could throw at him. He'd watched his wife die, lost his business, declared bankruptcy, started over from nothing. Miranda could threaten him, could attack his reputation, could make his life difficult, but she couldn't take what mattered most. She couldn't take Lily, couldn't take his skills, couldn't take the knowledge his father had passed down and he was now passing forward. Ethan deleted the message and called Sarah Volkov. Miranda just sent me a direct threat. I'm forwarding it to you now. Good. That's evidence of harassment. Keep saving everything she sends. Volkov's keyboard clicked in the background. The 60 Minutes segment is scheduled to air in 3 days. Once that broadcast, public opinion will solidify in your favor. Miranda's window to damage you is closing. Unless she has something really damaging that I don't know about. Does she? Ethan thought about it carefully. There are things that look bad without context. The cash jobs I took right after Sarah died, some of them probably violated licensing requirements. I was desperate and not thinking clearly. There was an eviction notice that I fought and won, but it's on record. Nothing criminal, but it could be spun as financial irresponsibility if framed correctly. Volkov was quiet for a moment. Okay, we get ahead of it. In the 60 Minutes interview, you mentioned the desperate measures you took. Frame it as a father doing whatever necessary to keep his daughter housed and fed. Turn potential ammunition into evidence of your dedication. I didn't mention that to Diana. Call her. She'll do a follow-up question. Trust me, the narrative of desperate father doing whatever it takes is much stronger than financially irresponsible worker. Ethan made the call. Diana agreed immediately to add the context. She understood the game being played, how stories could be weaponized, how truth was less important than framing. The next 48 hours passed in controlled chaos. Ethan signed contracts with Chen, formalized the partnership with Dr. Kim, hired Sarah Volkov on retainer, and started fielding calls from companies interested in consulting work. An automotive manufacturer in Ohio had a production line problem that their engineers couldn't solve. A renewable energy startup in California needed help with mechanical integration. A medical device company in Massachusetts was looking for troubleshooters. Word was spreading. The janitor who'd fix the unfixable was for hire, and he came with a team of overlooked experts who approached problems from angles that traditional engineers missed. Ethan conducted phone interviews with potential team members, a 52-year-old machinist who'd been laid off when his factory automated, a 30-year-old woman who'd learned diesel mechanics from her trucker father but couldn't afford technical school, a 60-year-old electrical technician who'd been told he was too old to retrain when his company downsized. Each conversation revealed the same pattern: brilliant practical knowledge, real problem-solving ability, and years of being told they weren't qualified because they lacked the right credentials. We're building something special here, Ethan told each of them. A place where what you can do matters more than what degrees you have. But it's going to be hard. We're challenging a system that's been in place for decades. Are you ready for that? Every single one of them said yes. The night before the 60 Minutes segment aired, Ethan barely slept. He kept imagining how people would react, what Miranda would do in response, whether he'd said too much or not enough. At 3 a.m., he gave up on sleep and sat at his kitchen table looking at Lily's science project. She'd gotten an A. The teacher's note said Lily had explained the circuit with impressive clarity, showing deep understanding of the principles. Like father, like daughter. Understanding things through hands-on exploration rather than abstract theory. Ethan's phone buzzed, a text from Catherine Martinez. The segment is going to be devastating for Miranda. I've seen the advance clip 60 Minutes sent to media outlets for promotion. Your story, it's powerful, but be prepared. She's going to retaliate hard. I heard she's planning a press conference tomorrow to set the record straight. Whatever that means, it won't be good. Another text came in, this one from David Chen at Vanguard. Half the engineering team has signed a letter calling for Miranda's permanent removal and threatening to resign if she's reinstated. Your interview gave people courage to speak up. Thank you. Then one from Sarah Rodriguez. I just watched the advance segment. Jesus, Ethan, you've been through hell. I'm sorry I didn't see it when we were working together. Nobody did. That's the point, I guess. Invisible people stay invisible until someone makes them visible. You're visible now. Make it count. At 7 p.m. the next evening, Ethan sat on his couch with Lily beside him and Jennifer on his other side. The 60 Minutes logo appeared on screen, and then there he was, Ethan Cole, shot in soft light that made his exhaustion and determination equally visible. The segment was 20 minutes long. Diana had woven together the interview footage, the B-roll, and external commentary from workplace experts and labor advocates. The narrative she'd constructed was devastating in its simplicity. A good man destroyed by America's broken healthcare system, forced into invisibility to survive, then publicly humiliated by a billionaire who saw him as less than human. The footage of Miranda snapping the mop, of her sneering challenge, played in stark contrast to Ethan's quiet competence as he diagnosed the engine problem. The moment when the engine kept running past the 8-minute failure point was cinematic, the room erupting while Miranda's face collapsed into fury. But it was the personal story that hit hardest. Ethan talking about Sarah's death, about choosing which bills to pay, about the night he'd considered giving up. Lily appearing on screen for 30 seconds, showing her science project to the camera, saying, "My daddy can fix anything," with complete faith. The segment ended with Ethan standing in front of his old shop, talking about legacy and dignity and teaching the next generation to listen before they look. "I'm not special," he told Diana in the final interview clip. "I'm just someone who learned skills from his father and applied them when given a chance. There are millions of people like me, people with real knowledge who've been told they're not qualified. This isn't just my story, it's theirs too, and it's time the system recognized that." The screen faded to black. The three of them sat in silence. "Holy shit, Daddy," Lily finally said. "You were really good on TV." "Lily, language." "But you were," Jennifer was crying quietly. "Sarah would be so proud of you, so incredibly proud." Ethan's phone started buzzing immediately, messages flooding in faster than he could read them. Twitter was exploding. The segment's hashtag was trending. Comments were overwhelmingly supportive, people sharing their own stories of medical bankruptcy and workplace humiliation and being overlooked despite their skills. But there were also the other messages. The ones calling him a fraud, a liar, a manipulator playing the victim for attention. Most were anonymous, but Ethan recognized Miranda's fingerprints in the coordinated talking points. At 9 p.m., Miranda's press conference began. Ethan watched it on his laptop, Jennifer and Lily now gone, alone in his apartment with the weight of what was coming. Miranda looked polished and professional in a navy suit, standing at a podium with the Vanguard logo behind her. Her expression was controlled, almost sympathetic. "I've watched the 60-minute segment with great sadness," she began. "Ethan Cole's personal story is tragic. No one should have to suffer the loss of a spouse or face financial ruin due to medical bills. I have nothing but compassion for what he's endured." Ethan's jaw tightened. Here it came. However, compassion doesn't excuse deception. Miranda's voice hardened. Mr. Cole presented himself to Vanguard Technologies as a simple janitor when he was, in fact, a trained mechanic with years of technical experience. He deliberately concealed his qualifications on his employment application. That's fraud. She pulled up documents on the screen behind her. Furthermore, during his time at Vanguard, Mr. Cole had after-hours access to our proprietary engineering lab. He claims he diagnosed the engine problem in minutes, but the reality is that he'd had months of unauthorized access. How do we know he didn't create the problem in order to solve it? The accusation hung in the air. Miranda let it settle before continuing. "I'm not saying Mr. Cole is a bad person. I'm saying he's a damaged person who made questionable choices. And now, rather than taking responsibility, he's created a narrative where he's the victim and I'm the villain. That's not just unfair, it's dangerous." She looked directly into the camera. "The truth is more complex than a viral moment. The truth is that I gave Mr. Cole an opportunity to solve a problem. He did solve it, and I offered him a promotion and significant compensation. He refused, which is his right, but then he went to the media with a one-sided story designed to damage my reputation and my company." Miranda's expression became almost pleading. "I've spent 10 years building Vanguard Technologies into a leader in our industry. I've created thousands of jobs. I've advanced technology that will change lives, and now all of that is at risk because one disgruntled employee decided to weaponize his personal tragedy." The press conference continued for another 20 minutes. Reporters asked questions about the board's decision, about the employee complaints, about her management style. Miranda deflected, redirected, reframed. By the end, she'd constructed a counter-narrative where she was the reasonable leader dealing with an unstable employee who'd manipulated public opinion. It was masterful, ruthless and dishonest, but masterful. Ethan's phone rang. Sarah Volkov. Did you watch? Every second. She's good. I'll give her that. She's very good. Volkov's tone was grim. But she made mistakes. The fraud accusation is provably false. Your application was accurate. The suggestion that you sabotaged the engine is actionable slander. And the characterization of you as damaged and unstable is going to backfire hard when people see it as attacking someone for grief and medical bankruptcy. So we fight back? We already are. I've got statements going out from the Vanguard employees who witnessed everything, from Catherine Martinez about Miranda's retaliation tactics, from Dr. Kim about your partnership and the value you're creating. We flood the zone with context that undermines her narrative. This is exhausting. Welcome to warfare. Volkov's voice softened slightly. But Ethan, you're winning. Public opinion is on your side. The board removed her. Companies are hiring you. You're building something real. Don't let her press conference shake that. After the call, Ethan sat in the darkness of his apartment, thinking about truth and narrative and the space between them. Everything Miranda had said was technically defensible. He had concealed his qualifications. He had been given access to the lab. His personal tragedy did make him vulnerable to emotional manipulation, but the spirit of her accusations was poison. She'd taken facts and twisted them into weapons, turned his survival strategies into evidence of deception, made his grief into proof of instability. This was what power looked like when threatened. Not direct violence, but sophisticated manipulation. Not obvious lies, but careful reframing that made truth serve dishonesty. Ethan understood now why so many people stayed invisible, why they accepted humiliation rather than fighting back, why they chose safety over dignity. Fighting back meant this: constant attacks, exhausting defense, every vulnerability exposed and weaponized. But staying invisible meant letting people like Miranda win, meant accepting that some people mattered more than others, meant teaching Lily that the right response to injustice was silence. His phone buzzed. One more message, from a number he didn't recognize. Mr. Cole, my name is Thomas Wright. I'm a documentary filmmaker. I've been following your story, and I think there's a larger film here about class, expertise, and who gets to be heard in America. Would you be interested in talking? No pressure, no obligation, just a conversation about what this moment means. Ethan stared at the message, a documentary. His story, expanded and explored and preserved. Part of him wanted to say no, to retreat back into privacy, to protect what little shelter remained. But the larger part, the part that had walked into Vanguard's conference room and fixed the impossible, the part that had refused Miranda's control, the part that Sarah had loved and Lily still believed in, that part knew the answer had to be yes. Because visibility, once chosen, demanded commitment. You couldn't be halfway visible. You either stepped fully into the light or retreated back to shadow. And Ethan Cole was done with shadows. He typed back. Let's talk. The documentary filmmaker Thomas Wright arrived in Detroit 3 days later with a small crew and an intensity that reminded Ethan of his father. The way some people approach their work like it was sacred, like getting it right mattered more than getting it done quickly. They met at a coffee shop in Midtown, neutral territory away from the apartment where Ethan was trying to maintain some semblance of normal life for Lily. Thomas was younger than Ethan expected, maybe 35, with intelligent eyes and the kind of focus that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. I want to be clear about what I'm proposing, Thomas said after they'd ordered coffee. This isn't just about you fixing an engine or standing up to a CEO. It's about the thousands of people working jobs that society deems low skill while possessing knowledge that academia can't measure. You're the story, but you're also the entry point to something much larger. Ethan wrapped his hands around his coffee cup, absorbing the warmth. How long would this take? 6 months to a year of filming, following you as you build this consulting company, as you work with Dr. Kim's students, as you take on clients. I want to show the process, not just the outcome. The struggles, the setbacks, the moments when it almost falls apart. You're assuming it doesn't actually fall apart. If it does, that's the film. Either way, we're documenting something important about American labor and expertise and who gets valued. Thomas leaned forward. But I need to know you're committed. This only works if you let me see the real thing, not a curated version. The hard conversations, the financial stress, the impact on your daughter, all of it. Ethan thought about Lily, about exposing her to even more scrutiny than she'd already faced. But he also thought about the messages he'd been receiving from single parents working night shifts, from people who'd lost everything to medical bills, from kids in vocational programs who finally saw someone like them being taken seriously. I'll do it. But Lily gets veto power over any footage involving her. And if at any point this starts hurting her, we stop. Those are my only conditions. Thomas extended his hand. Deal. That same afternoon, Ethan met with his first official consulting client, the automotive manufacturer in Ohio, with the production line problem. The plant manager, a gruff man named Dale Kowalski, greeted him with obvious skepticism. Corporate sent you because of that viral video, Dale said bluntly. No offense, but I've been running this plant for 23 years. I don't need some internet celebrity telling me how to do my job. Then don't think of me as an internet celebrity. Think of me as another set of eyes with different experience. Ethan followed Dale through the facility, taking in the massive assembly line that currently sat idle. Tell me about the problem. Conveyor system keeps jamming at Station 7. We've had 3 different engineering teams look at it. They've checked the mechanics, the programming, the load distribution. Everything tests fine in isolation, but put it all together and it jams every 47 minutes like clockwork. Ethan felt a familiar tingle of recognition. Every 47 minutes? That's too consistent to be random mechanical failure. That's what I said. But the engineers keep insisting it's a hardware issue. They spent an hour at Station 7 while Ethan watched the line operate. He didn't touch anything, didn't interrupt the flow. Just observed the way his father had taught him, looking for patterns, listening for rhythms, paying attention to the small details that automated systems and diagnostic software missed. The jam happened right on schedule. 47 minutes after startup, the conveyor lurched, parts piled up, and the whole line ground to a halt. Dale's team scrambled to clear it, frustrated efficiency in every movement. They'd done this hundreds of times. Can you show me the maintenance logs? Ethan asked. Dale pulled up the digital records on a tablet. Ethan scrolled through months of data, looking for patterns. There. A note from 4 months ago about replacing a sensor at Station 6, just upstream from where the jams occurred. This sensor replacement, what was wrong with the old one? Nothing. It was part of a scheduled upgrade. New sensors are more accurate. Corporate wanted consistency across all plants. And the jams started when? Dale checked his own records. His expression shifted. About 3 weeks after the sensor upgrade. But that can't be related. The new sensors are better, more precise. More precise, Ethan repeated slowly. An idea was forming. What if that's the problem? What if the new sensor is so precise that it's detecting micro variations the old one ignored? Tiny inconsistencies that trigger safety protocols downstream? Dale stared at him. The parts aren't perfectly uniform. We've got tolerances, slight variations in manufacturing that the old sensor treated as acceptable. But if the new sensor is flagging every tiny deviation and sending that data to Station 7's control system, then Station 7 is making microscopic adjustments trying to compensate for variations that don't actually matter. 47 minutes is how long it takes for those tiny adjustments to compound into a jam. Ethan pulled up the sensor specifications. This isn't a Station 7 problem. It's a Station 6 solution creating a Station 7 problem. They spent the next 2 hours recalibrating the sensor tolerance levels, teaching it to ignore the variations that didn't impact quality. When they restarted the line, Ethan and Dale stood watching the clock. 47 minutes passed. 50. 60. 2 hours. 4 hours. No jam. Dale's entire demeanor transformed. I'll be damned. 3 consulting firms, 6 visits, probably $300,000 in diagnostic work, and you solved it by asking about maintenance logs. Because I'm not smarter than those consultants, I just asked different questions. Ethan watched the line run smoothly, parts flowing like water. They were looking for what was broken. I was looking for what changed. Dale extended his hand. Whatever your fee is, it's worth it. and I'm telling every plant manager I know about you." The documentary crew had filmed the entire interaction. Thomas's face behind the camera showed quiet satisfaction. This was the story he wanted. Not dramatic engine repairs in front of crowds, but quiet competence solving real problems through different ways of thinking. Over the next 3 months, Ethan's consulting business grew faster than he'd imagined possible. The Ohio plant's success led to referrals from other manufacturers. Dr. Kim's partnership provided a steady stream of talented workers eager to prove themselves. Robert Chen's connections opened doors at companies that never would have taken Ethan's call 6 months earlier. The team Ethan assembled reflected his vision. The laid-off machinist became their mechanical systems expert. The diesel mechanic specialized in power transmission problems. The electrical technician led troubleshooting for integrated systems. Each brought knowledge earned through years of hands-on work, knowledge that complemented rather than competed with traditional engineering. They took on projects that desperate companies had given up on. A pharmaceutical manufacturer whose packaging line kept producing defective seals. A robotics company whose automation kept failing in ways the programmers couldn't diagnose. A renewable energy startup whose wind turbines worked perfectly in testing but failed in real-world conditions. Every problem had the same underlying pattern: systems designed by people who understood theory but not practice, calibrated in isolation but failing in integration, optimized for ideal conditions but breaking under real-world stress. And every solution involved the same approach: listen, observe, look for what changed, trust hands-on knowledge over theoretical models. The documentary crew captured it all. Ethan teaching Dr. Kim's students to diagnose problems by sound and vibration. Late-night phone calls with clients whose production lines were down. Tense moments when solutions didn't work immediately and doubt crept in. The slow satisfaction of solving the unsolvable. But they also filmed the cost. Ethan missing Lily's school play because a client emergency kept him in Cleveland overnight. The stress of managing cash flow and payroll when clients paid slowly. The moments when Ethan lay awake at 3 a.m. wondering if he'd made a terrible mistake, if stability as a janitor would have been better than this constant pressure. Miranda's attacks continued throughout those months, though they grew more sophisticated. She didn't confront Ethan directly anymore. Instead, she worked through proxies and insinuation. Anonymous sources leaked stories about Cole Consulting's questionable hiring practices and uncertified workers. Trade publications ran op-eds questioning whether practical knowledge could really replace formal education. Corporate lawyers sent cease and desist letters over minor technical disputes. Each attack was designed to create doubt, to make potential clients nervous, to remind everyone that Ethan was an upstart challenging the natural order. But each attack also backfired. The publicity kept Ethan's story in circulation. The defense required provided opportunities to articulate his philosophy. The opposition unified his team around a shared mission. Sarah Volkov handled the legal battles with ruthless efficiency, turning Miranda's harassment into evidence for a countersuit. Robert Chen used his board position to shield Ethan from the worst corporate retaliation. And the documentary Thomas was filming became a weapon in itself. Miranda couldn't be too overtly vindictive while cameras were documenting everything. 6 months after the viral moment that started it all, Ethan sat in a conference room at Vanguard Technologies for the first time since he'd walked out of Miranda's office. But now he wasn't a janitor. He was a consultant, invited back by the company's new leadership to address a different kind of problem. The board had finally forced Miranda's complete resignation. The severance package was enormous, enough money to fund a small country, but it came with strict non-compete and non-disparagement clauses. She was out, permanently, barred from ever working in tech leadership again. Robert Chen, now permanent CEO, had asked Ethan to help restructure Vanguard's approach to talent development and hiring. "We've been operating under the assumption that credentials equal competence," Chen explained to the assembled executives. Ethan's work over the past 6 months has proven that assumption wrong. We're losing talent because we're looking in the wrong places, asking the wrong questions, valuing the wrong things. Ethan stood at the front of the room, the same room where Miranda had humiliated him, where he'd fixed the impossible engine, where everything had changed. It felt surreal to be here by invitation, to be listened to rather than mocked. "The question isn't whether formal education has value," Ethan said. "It does. The question is whether it's the only path to expertise, and the answer is clearly no." He pulled up data from his consulting projects. Every problem we've solved in the last 6 months involved collaboration between formally trained engineers and practically trained technicians. The engineers brought theoretical knowledge. The technicians brought embodied understanding. Together they solved what neither could solve alone. He advanced to the next slide. What I'm proposing is a hybrid hiring and training model. You continue recruiting from universities, but you also recruit from vocational programs, from technical schools, from people with demonstrated practical knowledge. You create teams that combine different types of expertise. You value what people can do, not just what degrees they hold. The room was silent. Then Sarah Rodriguez, who'd been promoted to Chief Engineering Officer after Miranda's departure, spoke up. We'd be the first major tech company to formally adopt this approach. The industry would call us crazy. They called us crazy for hiring a janitor as a consultant, Chen said dryly. How'd that work out? Over the next hour, they hammered out the framework. Vanguard would create a new hiring track for non-traditional candidates. They'd partner with Dr. Kim's program to provide apprenticeships. They'd restructure teams to include both engineers and technicians with equal status. They'd become a laboratory for a different approach to expertise. It wouldn't be easy. The resistance would be enormous, but it would also be revolutionary if it worked. As the meeting ended, Ethan gathered his materials, preparing to leave. Chen stopped him at the door. There's one more thing. Miranda's office is empty now. I'd like you to consider taking it. Ethan looked at Chen like he'd suggested jumping off the building. What? Chief Innovation Officer. Lead this new initiative from the inside. Shape how we implement these changes. It's the best way to ensure your vision actually happens. Robert, I appreciate the offer, but I have my own company now, my own team. People depending on me. Bring them with you. Make Cole Consulting a division of Vanguard. You keep operational control, we provide resources and stability. Your daughter gets health insurance, college fund, security. You get to build something that lasts beyond any individual project. It was tempting. The stability, the resources, the platform to implement change at scale. Everything Ethan had been working toward, gift-wrapped and offered. But something in his gut resisted. He'd spent 6 months proving that independence mattered, that you could build something valuable outside traditional structures. Taking a corporate position now, even a powerful one, felt like retreat. Like accepting that the only way to change the system was from inside it. I need time to think about it, to talk to my team. Take a week. But Ethan, this is how you make lasting change. Not as an outsider fighting the system, but as an insider reforming it. That night, Ethan discussed the offer with everyone who mattered. Jennifer thought he'd be crazy to turn down that kind of security. Sarah Volkov saw the strategic value, but worried about corporate constraints. Dr. Kim feared he'd be co-opted, that Vanguard would water down his vision into something safe and manageable. But it was Lily's response that cut deepest. She was 9 years old, perceptive beyond her years, and she'd been watching her father navigate this journey with quiet attention. Daddy, do you remember what Mom used to say about your shop? Ethan smiled sadly. She said a lot of things about the shop. She said it was special because it was yours, because you could help people the way you wanted to help them, not the way some boss told you to. Lily looked up at him with Sarah's eyes. If you go work for that company, will it still be yours? Out of the mouths of children. Ethan pulled Lily close, breathing in her apple shampoo smell, feeling the weight of her wisdom. The next morning, he called Robert Chen. I appreciate the offer more than you know, but I'm going to decline. Cole Consulting needs to stay independent. We'll partner with Vanguard. We'll take on projects together. We'll share knowledge and resources. But we can't be absorbed. The whole point is showing that there's another way. Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then he laughed. I knew you'd say that. Sarah, my wife, she bet me $1,000 you'd turn it down. She said anyone who walked away from Miranda's offer would never accept corporate constraints, no matter how generous. Smart woman. The smartest. Okay, we'll do it your way. Partnership, not acquisition. But Ethan, keep the door open. Someday you might change your mind. Someday, but not today. The documentary premiered 8 months after that conversation at a film festival in Austin. Thomas had titled it The Invisible Expert, and it was everything Ethan had feared and hoped it would be. Intimate, unflinching, honest about both the triumphs and the struggles. The film opened with the viral moment, Miranda snapping the mop, Ethan fixing the engine. But then it pulled back to show the context: Sarah's death, the medical bills, the grinding poverty of night shift work. It followed Ethan as he built the company, showing the late nights and the close calls and the moments when failure seemed inevitable. But it also showed the victories: clients whose problems got solved, workers from Dr. Kim's program landing good jobs, the gradual shift in how some companies thought about expertise and credentials, small changes that might, over time, add up to something larger. The most powerful sequence came near the end. Ethan teaching a class at Dr. Kim's facility, showing students how to diagnose a complex mechanical problem. The camera captured his hands moving over the equipment, his voice explaining not just what to do, but how to think about problems. And interspersed with that footage were interviews with his father's old customers, people who remembered Cole and Son Automotive, who talked about how Ethan's dad had taught him the same way. The film ended with Ethan and Lily at the site of the old shop. The building was still abandoned, still broken, but Ethan was telling Lily stories about her grandfather, about the knowledge that had been passed down, about the importance of listening before looking. Someday, Ethan said to his daughter on screen, maybe we'll open a new shop. Not to replace what we lost, but to honor it. To keep teaching the way your grandfather taught me. And I'll learn too? Lily asked. If you want to, only if you want to. I want to, Daddy. I want to fix things like you do. The screen faded to black. The theater erupted in applause. The film won awards, got distribution. Started conversations about labor and expertise and education reform. It made Ethan's story part of a larger cultural moment, a focal point for debates about who deserved opportunity and how society valued different forms of knowledge. But for Ethan, the real impact was smaller and more personal. It was the messages from single parents who said the film gave them hope. The vocational students who said they felt seen for the first time. The workers who'd been told they weren't qualified finally believing they had something to offer. Cole Consulting continued to grow. Not explosively, not into the next unicorn startup, but steadily into something sustainable. They developed a reputation for solving the unsolvable, for bringing fresh perspectives to intractable problems, for valuing hands-on knowledge alongside theoretical expertise. Ethan hired Catherine Martinez as his operations manager. She brought organizational skills and corporate experience that his team desperately needed, and she brought something else too, a desire to atone for the years she'd enabled Miranda's cruelty by building something better. Sarah Rodriguez left Vanguard after a year and joined Cole Consulting as a partner, bridging the gap between traditional engineering and practical knowledge. She and Ethan developed a training protocol that combined academic rigor with hands-on learning, creating a model that other companies started adopting. Dr. Kim's program expanded, funded in part by grants inspired by the documentary. They created certification tracks that employers actually respected, proof that competence could be measured without requiring four-year degrees. And slowly, incrementally, the system began to shift. Not everywhere, not completely, but enough to matter. Enough that kids like Lily would grow up in a world that valued different paths to expertise, that recognized that knowledge came in many forms. 2 years after the viral moment, Ethan received an unexpected email. The subject line read simply, "Apology." The sender was Miranda Vale. Ethan stared at it for a long time before opening it. Part of him wanted to delete it unread, to refuse her the satisfaction of acknowledgement. But curiosity won out. "Mr. Cole, I don't expect you to read this, and I certainly don't expect forgiveness. But I owe you an apology, and silence has become more painful than the vulnerability of reaching out. What I did to you was unconscionable. I told myself I was teaching a lesson about respect and hierarchy, but the truth is, I was exercising cruelty because I could. Because humiliating you made me feel powerful at a moment when I felt increasingly powerless in other ways. I've spent the past 2 years in therapy, working through the patterns of behavior that led to that moment, and to the many other moments where I hurt people who didn't deserve it. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I'm just acknowledging the harm I caused and taking responsibility for it. You were right to walk away from my offer. You were right to build something independent. You were right about everything, and I was wrong. I hope your daughter knows how lucky she is to have a father who models dignity and courage. Respectfully, Miranda Vale. Ethan read the email 3 times. He thought about the woman who'd snapped a mop in half and challenged him to prove his worth. The woman who'd threatened and attacked and tried to destroy him. The woman who was now, apparently, taking responsibility for her actions. He didn't know if the apology was genuine or strategic, sincere or calculating. Maybe Miranda herself didn't know. Maybe it was both. After a long consideration, Ethan replied, Miss Vale, I appreciate you taking the time to write this. What you did caused real harm, and I'm glad you're working to address the patterns that led to it. I accept your apology not because it erases what happened, but because I believe people can change if they're willing to do the work. I hope you find a path forward that honors the genuine brilliance you possess while rejecting the cruelty that tarnished it. Regards, Ethan Cole. He hit send before he could second-guess himself. Some wounds needed acknowledgement before they could heal. Some bridges needed to be rebuilt, even if they'd never bear the same weight. 3 months later, something unexpected happened. Dr. Kim called with unusual news. Ethan, I have a strange request. Miranda Vale wants to volunteer at the program, teaching business skills, helping students understand corporate culture, using her network to create opportunities. She's offering to do it completely unpaid, no publicity, no strings attached. Ethan's first instinct was immediate refusal. But then he thought about the email, about the possibility of redemption, about whether he wanted to be the kind of person who blocked someone's attempt to do better. What do you think? He asked Dr. Kim. Honestly, I think she's trying to earn her way back from the bottom, and there's something powerful about that. The students would learn from someone who succeeded at the highest level and then lost everything through her own failures. That's a valuable lesson too. Put it to your students. Let them decide. If they're comfortable with it, I won't object. The students voted to give Miranda a chance. She started teaching 1 class a week, sharing her expertise in business development and corporate strategy. She was humble in a way that seemed genuine, acknowledging her past mistakes when relevant, focusing on teaching rather than rehabilitating her image. Ethan never attended her classes. He wasn't ready for that, might never be ready. But he heard reports from students who found her brilliant and broken and surprisingly human. Someone who'd had everything and lost it through her own cruelty, now trying to build something meaningful from the ruins. Maybe that was its own kind of expertise, understanding failure deeply enough to teach others how to avoid it. On Lily's 10th birthday, Ethan took her to see a building in East Detroit. It was small, needed work, but the structure was sound and the price was something Cole Consulting could actually afford. What do you think? He asked his daughter. Think this could be a new shop? Lily walked through the empty space, her footsteps echoing. She ran her hands along the walls, tested the doors, looked up at the ceiling with an appraising eye that reminded Ethan painfully of Sarah. It needs a lot of work, she said finally. But yeah, Daddy, I think it could be good. We could keep the office for Cole Consulting in Midtown. This would be something different, a training center, a place where people come to learn hands-on skills, maybe weekend classes, maybe after-school programs for kids who want to learn how things work. Like Grandpa's shop used to be? Like that? But also new. Our own thing. Lily nodded slowly. Can we call it Cole and Daughter? Ethan's throat tightened. Yeah, baby, we can call it that. Over the next 6 months, they renovated the space together. Ethan taught Lily how to frame walls, how to wire electrical systems, how to install plumbing. She learned by doing, making mistakes, figuring out solutions. The documentary crew filmed some of it, a follow-up short about legacy and generational knowledge. The shop opened on a Saturday in September. Nothing fancy, just a small ceremony with friends and colleagues and students from Dr. Kim's program. They'd equipped it with tools donated by manufacturers who'd become clients, workbenches built by volunteers, and a sign above the door that read Cole and Daughter, where listening matters. Robert Chen attended, bringing a bottle of champagne that was probably absurdly expensive. Sarah Rodriguez brought the Vanguard engineering team. Catherine Martinez brought a cake she'd baked herself. Dr. Kim brought students who'd been inspired by Ethan's story to pursue careers in technical fields. And in the back, trying to stay unnoticed, stood Miranda Vale. She didn't approach Ethan directly, didn't make the moment about herself. She just watched quietly, a ghost at the celebration of something she'd inadvertently created by trying to destroy it. Ethan saw her. Their eyes met across the crowded shop. He nodded once, acknowledgement without forgiveness, recognition without reconciliation. She nodded back, understanding the boundary, respecting the distance. Then she slipped out before anyone else noticed she'd been there. As the celebration wound down and people started leaving, Ethan stood in the center of the shop with Lily. The space smelled like sawdust and possibility. The tools waited patiently for hands that would use them. The workbenches were clean and ready for problems that needed solving. "You did it, Daddy," Lily said quietly. "You built something good." "We built it. You helped. But you started it. When that mean lady tried to make you feel small, you refused. You were brave." Ethan pulled his daughter close. "You want to know a secret? I was terrified. Still am sometimes. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the thing anyway." "Is that what Mom would have wanted? For you to be brave?" "Your mom wanted me to be myself, to use the knowledge I have, to help people, to teach you that dignity matters more than safety." Ethan looked around the shop, at the physical manifestation of 2 years of struggle and growth and change. "I think she'd be proud of this. I think your grandfather would be too." "I'm proud of you, Daddy." Those 4 words spoken in Sarah's voice through Lily's mouth were worth every sleepless night and legal battle and moment of doubt, worth the humiliation and the struggle and the constant pressure of building something from nothing. Thomas appeared in the doorway, camera lowered for once. "That's a wrap. We've got enough for the follow-up film." "Already?" "The story's not about the building, it's about the journey. You've traveled it, built a company, changed an industry conversation, created opportunities for people who'd been invisible, opened a shop to pass knowledge forward." "That's an ending," Ethan smiled. "Feels more like a beginning. The best endings do." That night, after Lily was asleep, Ethan sat at his kitchen table with a cup of terrible coffee and his father's old journals. He paged through the handwritten notes, the diagrams, the accumulated wisdom of a lifetime spent fixing things. On the last page, his father had written something Ethan had read 100 times but never fully understood until now. The work isn't just fixing what's broken. It's teaching others how to fix, so the knowledge doesn't die with us. It's listening to what the world needs and offering what we have. It's staying humble about what we know and curious about what we don't. It's remembering that every person has value, every skill matters, and dignity isn't negotiable. This is what I'm passing to you, son, not just the tools or the techniques, but the philosophy. Build things that last. Fix what's broken. Teach what you know. Listen before you look. And never let anyone make you small. Ethan closed the journal carefully. His father had died thinking his son would carry on the shop, never knowing it would close, never seeing the bankruptcy and grief and desperate years that followed. But he'd given Ethan something more durable than a business. He'd given him a way of being in the world, a set of values, a belief that knowledge mattered, that listening mattered, that dignity mattered. And somehow, impossibly, Ethan had managed to pass that forward. To Lily. To his team. To the students at Dr. Kim's program. To everyone who'd been inspired by a viral video of a janitor refusing to accept humiliation. The invisible man hadn't just become visible. He'd helped others see themselves. 6 months later, the documentary follow-up premiered. It was shorter than the first film, more reflective. It showed Cole and daughter opening, showed Ethan teaching students in the new space, showed Lily learning to diagnose an engine problem by sound alone. But it also showed Miranda volunteering at Dr. Kim's program, showed her teaching, humble and competent, and genuinely trying to rebuild from her own ruins. The film didn't forgive her or redeem her, but it allowed for the possibility that people could change, that even cruelty could be confronted and overcome with enough courage and therapy. The final scene was simple. Ethan and Lily working together on a complex repair, communicating in the shorthand that comes from deep familiarity. Lily's hands moving confidently, her voice asking smart questions, her mind making connections. The camera pulled back slowly until the frame showed them through the shop window, a father and daughter, building knowledge together, passing something precious forward into an uncertain future. The screen faded to black. The final title card read, "Knowledge is not owned, it is shared, and in sharing, it grows." Ethan Cole never became famous in the traditional sense. His name didn't become a household word. He didn't write a best-selling memoir or start a tech unicorn or get invited to speak at TED conferences. But he changed things, small things mostly. Individual lives and careers and possibilities. A different way of thinking about expertise that spread slowly through certain industries. A model for combining practical and theoretical knowledge that a few progressive companies adopted. A reminder that value came in forms that credentials couldn't capture. And he raised a daughter who understood that dignity mattered, that listening was a skill, that knowledge was something you earned and shared rather than hoarded and displayed. Years later, when Lily was in college studying mechanical engineering but spending her weekends at Cole and Daughter teaching younger students, someone asked Ethan what his greatest accomplishment was. He didn't mention the viral moment or the documentary or the company or the shop. He said, "I survived something that should have destroyed me, and I turned that survival into something useful for other people. I refused to stay invisible, and that refusal created space for others to be seen." Then he smiled. "Also, I raised a pretty remarkable kid, but she mostly did that herself." The invisible man had been seen, had made room for others to be seen, had built something that would outlast the viral moment and the media attention and the temporary fame. He'd built legacy. Not in the dramatic world-changing sense, but in the quieter, more durable sense. Knowledge passed forward, dignity preserved, people helped. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.